I'll call this meeting to order. Start with pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do you want to take roll call?
Andy Schreiber,
Here.
Kristen Ratnell,
Here.
Andy Neary,
Yes.
Jake Letterman,
Here.
Dr. Julie Sprague,
Here.
Danny Hyatt.
Here.
Okay. Before we move on to public comment, I just want to say thanks to Julie for the treats tonight in honor of School Board Appreciation Week.
And Mary Kay.
And Mary Kay, thank you. So, do we have any public comment?
No.
None? Okay. Seeing there's no public comment, we'll move on to new business. And first off is biennial budget discussion. There was no attachment, so I'm,
Deanna, I guess I apologize for that. We had a discussion at the last meeting with both Andy and Danny where
But that's the finance meeting.
You gotta do this 4 times now.
Really?
Well, every committee.
yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. Did you?
I actually looked at Jake's agenda and didn't see it on there, and I don't know if that was last Friday. I looked at it, was on there
That's
last
the
Friday.
intention,
What's that he was,
Then I did pay attention.
the same presentation at each committee meeting?
it don't have to be the same, it can just be where we can get the ideas, and then as board members are given ideas throughout each committee too, then we come back together and get one general consensus of the board, and working with Tim to make those appeals, that one appeal to the legislatures.
Okay.
So, there's a couple things that we talked about, maybe Andy can jump in and help me since I'm ill prepared tonight, but within the revenue limit formula, there is generally an inflationary portion on the revenue limit increase. And for the current biennial budget from the state, there is no increase. And the revenue limit formula came into being back in 1994. And the limit, each district's limit, was set at 1992 expenditures. So if you look back at Antigo's history, the high school wasn't even built yet when revenue limits came into place. And then the year that we opened the high school, we were, we had all these new expenses, everything with operating a new building. We were restricted at 1992 expenditure rates. And since that time, there's been inflationary measures put into the budget. But Antigo is one of, and Andy helped me, there's about 150 districts, give or take, that are at the low, there's a part of the formula has, it's called low revenue limit ceiling. And for districts that haven't failed an operating referendum within the previous 3 years, they can be, their revenue limit is set at the low revenue limit ceiling. And ours is set at 10,000. So that's the basis of the discussion about why some people think the formula is broken, the revenue limit formula is broken. Because not all districts receive the same authority to spend, or actually the tax. Each one is different, and it's based way back on 1992. What I caution the board about is to also understand the revenue limit formula is one part. The aid formula, equalization aids, is another part. And board members, superintendents, and often business managers, they want to focus on what isn't working for their district. So in Antigo's case, we feel like we're getting shorted by the revenue limit formula. The aid formula, equalization aids, Antigo benefits tremendously by the equalization aid formula. And essentially what they look at is they look at property value within the district, and if you have high property values within your district, considered property rich, and the aid formula gives you less aid. Because we have things like, obviously we're a poorer community, and agriculturally, we've got a lot of ag land, and the valuation of the tax roll doesn't necessarily, might not be free market or fair market value. So our equalization per student is relatively low, and we're about $500,000, give or take, of equalized value per student. And the state average is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 to $800,000 per student. And so between the aid formula, we receive somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 67% of our expenditures are aided by state aids.
Can you say that number again?
As long as we're talking generalities, okay?
Yep.
So it's 65 to 68%, 67% of our general fund expenditures are aided at that rate. Then Annika also gets AGR funds, which a lot of districts don't get. And you've heard about the AGR program. We talked about it at the previous budget, the finance meeting. And with AGR, we're looking at kindergarten through third grade. And because we've consolidated all of our schools, and we have a high social economic need, we receive somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500 per student annually that qualify. And as a district, we receive something like $800,000 in AGR funds. So there's a lot of pieces, but because the inflationary measure of the revenue limit formula hasn't increased in 2 years, and you know what inflation has done for 2 years, we, in the general fund, we're getting tighter and tighter. And the general fund is based on enrollment. And as we decline, the reason for consolidation is we had to cut our expenses. And now we're in a configuration about as small as we can get. And we haven't had increases to the general fund for 2 years. So, in my opinion, it would benefit all schools across the state to have an additional amount put on the revenue limit formula. You'll hear John Humphreys talk about equity in funding. What John and his organization is promoting is to reduce the gap so that you have these low revenue spending districts. If they add, typically it's somewhere around $200-300 a year to the inflationary part, they raise the low revenue limit ceiling that much as well. So Annika never gets a chance to catch up. And I'll have some graphs at the hearing coming up where you can see that Annika's gap between what other districts with the state average is spending and what Annika is spending is actually falling behind. So that's one area where if we could specifically target the low revenue ceiling limit of the revenue limit formula and increase that rate so the have-nots can start catching up to the haves. The other thing we talked about is categorical aids for special education. So the general fund, all of the staffing for special education, let me just rephrase that. The majority of the staffing for special education, and it's essentially all the teachers, come out of the general fund. So on average, we're spending about $2.5 to $2.7 million of general fund money on special education. And we get reimbursed at a rate of about 30%. So one of the things that would benefit all children across the district and across the state is if that Fund 10 support of Fund 27 was reimbursed at a higher rate. And I know that Governor Evers has proposed over 2 years to get to 60%. That would benefit all school districts and all students in the state, because then there would be less money transferred from Fund 10 to Fund 27, because we have more state support. So those are the two pieces, those are the two things that I would recommend we focus on. Dr. Bardo talked about transportation aid as one where, as a district, we spend something like $1.2 million on transportation. We get aided at somewhere in the neighborhood of about $110,000 to $120,000 a year. And, you know, so I don't see that as a big aid bucket, but that would also help. But I caution where the biggest bang for the biggest buck is if we can get all districts, because not all districts spend a lot on transportation. Andy, what was the other things we talked about?
Well, you might want to mention if we ran a referendum and it failed,
Yeah,
how
so,
that works.
my understanding is it's an operating referendum. I don't know if the capital, I'd have to look at that. But, so we've got two forms of referendum. One is for operating funds, and the other is for capital campaigns with building, putting additions, remodeling, or whatever. If you fail, in legislature now, if you fail an operating referendum, you don't get, if the next biennial budget has inflationary measures built into it, you don't get that, because your community voted down the referendum. So there's a little bit of a danger. You gotta be pretty confident you're gonna pass if you're gonna go out and ask your voters for operating money. And that's with you for 3 years. Under current statute.
I just have two things here I want to share with my committee members. This would be the 22 districts in CISA 9 and what their revenue limit is.
In addition to what Andy has shared, I've actually sent all of you here tonight the entire state list that John Humphrey sent to me of what Andy's showing you, the 22 districts.
Yeah, I just pulled this
Yeah.
22
Yeah.
out, and I didn't see that you'd sent that.
I just did it while you were sitting here.
And then did you also send this?
I did not. No, thank you.
So I'll just,
So why is North Lakeland at just under 20,000?
Again, it goes back to 1992. And what they were spending, there's inflationary, you know, there's increments all along the way, but it was what was happening in 1992. And
What exactly is this dollars per?
This is the
No,
base
no.
revenue.
this one is the base revenue. Like ours is 10,000 and other districts are, some districts are more. There's about 5 in here that are 10,000.
the other important thing to remember is as we decline in enrollment, it doesn't curtail us from spending. It curtails us from raising revenue. And you're gonna hear me over the next couple of weeks, particularly with budget hearing, just remember that formula. So the revenue limit formula is based on state aid and local taxes. So in the biennial budget, to be clear, the legislature put more money into state aids, but they didn't allow us to raise revenue. So what you're gonna see, particularly with the levy coming up, I don't know what our state aids is, we're gonna know at the end of the week, but I'm predicting that state aids are gonna be up, which means the levy is gonna be down. It's also gonna be down because we lost enrollment. So the aid is based on last year's spending, and our revenue limit formula is based on current enrollment. So, it's great for local taxpayers because we're driving down, our taxes, but it doesn't give us any more operating money, which is difficult.
So when you go for a referendum, right, an operating referendum, is there like a minimum amount that you have to request, or is there? No.
No, I think all, you know, like a lot of districts go for a 3-year time frame, and I know Rhinelander is running one right now, $4 million. And I think it's for 3 years, which is coming off of a $5 million one. So their tax levy is going to go down because they're asking for $4 million instead of 5. But interestingly enough, they're asking for $4 million. It's going to cost taxpayers 70 cents a thousand. If we asked for $1 million, it would cost us about 85 cents a thousand. Is that correct, Jim?
Pretty close, yeah.
because we're so property poor. So like if we said, oh, we need 4 million like they do, we would be increasing our revenue limit by 50%. And we know that's not gonna happen, right? So the reality of us passing our operating is not that great unless,
So Andy, if we go back in time, and this is even before me, we were able to pass two of them.
yeah.
So, I think back, was it 1998 they passed one, and then they passed one in 2001?
Yeah. You know, districts that, once get them passed, you know, like they run out every 3 years. And so it's just easier to say, well, we're going to do the same dollar amount, or we're increasing by 25% or whatever, and it's not that hard to get to pass again. I know, I think it was Oshkosh, they had theirs, they would pass one every year. And it would be for 3 years, and so it's really for a third of the money every year, but somehow they thought that was easier to digest for people.
If you, the thing that's interesting about it is if you do that, remember you're getting shared cost, your E is based on prior year expenditures. So by raising the limit of what you can spend 1 year, you're gonna get 8 on it the following year, which means now you can tack on a little more, and it doesn't cost the voters because you've got more, and that portion has dropped off the levy. A portion of like in our case, if we, let's just say we have $100,000, we're gonna raise it $100,000 this, if you time it, you're gonna get 67,000 of that back in aid. So, you can, if you look at where you're at with the aid formula versus the revenue formula and the operating referenda, you can time it, but those districts have debt. We've paid off all of our debt. So we're stuck with whatever we spend, whatever the legislature chooses to give us. And we can't control the number anymore. We can by spending fund balance, and that's another discussion, but as we spend fund balance, we get aid on that. So for every dollar we spend, we get 67 cents back in aid. So you could time a referenda, spend some extra fund balance, and then that fall, after you spent it, put an operating referendum in place, and it would have zero impact if you plan different. That's the only lever you got left.
And a good example of that is Rhinelander, again, built the Hodag Dome. So they spent a lot of money, and then they got funded on that, a portion of that money the next year, right? Because they,
That gets into the aid formula, and what happened is they spent all the money, and they're negatively aided at the level that they spent it. So the year after they spent it, they got hammered in rural Texas, and then the following year after, is when their levy went back to normal and their aid was back to normal.
okay. So this is way more complicated than I understand, I think, is what was the point there is.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
You get a
sorry,
question,
I didn't
yes,
mean to
because
interrupt.
there's something else.
So what, is there like a set inflationary increase?
It's been all over, I mean, typically you would see numbers of $150 to $300, you know, so 1.5% to 2%, 3%. Governors have chosen to go higher than that, and under the Walker administration, they chose at one point to go less than that. They actually
Okay.
took money away from the fund.
Okay.
So Antigo received, I remember, I think it was like $600,000 reduction in the revenue formula.
So am I understanding this correctly, because this is, the revenue, I mean, the funding is just, is super complicated. So, for, in your example of like 100,000, right? If we passed a referendum that was just 100,000, then we would get normally get 1.5% to 3% inflationary increase. If it passed? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Just using, I mean, simple numbers, so,
So the operating referendum is separate from the revenue formula.
okay,
So, so they typically put some inflationary on it. So if you don't pass anything, there's typically some kind of inflation built into the formula.
Okay,
If we pass a referendum that's outside of the formula, so that gets added onto the levy separate, but the aid the following year, I'll come up with something for the budget hearing so you can
Okay.
visually see it.
yeah, if you could use like an example, that would be awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
When the district passed those two referendums back in 98, 2001, what was the dollar amount, do you recall?
I think both times it was $1 million. I mean, very close to $1 million if it was $1 million. The other thing you can do, which is quite interesting if you got nothing else to do, if you go to DPI's website and you Google referendum history, you can go back and you can see, like, and then you get that homepage, and there's a filter, and you can look at every district, and you can go back to about 1960. And it'll have the records, they'll have vote totals, how close, what they asked for, and the description of the referendum.
One of those operating referendums, as I recall, passed by 10 votes. So it's not a slam dunk here.
No,
by any
no.
means.
And perhaps you already shared that John Humphreys did agree to come to the board meeting this
Very
month.
good. I was gonna ask that, so thanks.
Okay, this other sheet I handed out, I just wanted to mention, this is, it has a number of, instead of if you look at Anago, for example, it has an enrollment of 1,758. This is the number of students who are not eligible for disability. And so the transfer amount in the next column is showing how much money comes from each of those students who's not, don't have disabilities. What we're taking from them to pay for special ed. Does that make sense?
Yes and no.
What you say makes sense, but the reality doesn't.
Okay,
Like, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't make sense that that is happening.
Well, this is,
Right.
if we were getting 100%, this number over here wouldn't exist.
Right.
If we got 60% instead of 30%, that number would be half,
Right.
maybe. It's just another way of saying that we're only getting 30%, we're only getting reimbursed 30%, but the other 60% is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from every student in the district to the tune of $1,600.
Yeah, so instead of getting 10,000 per student, we're actually, regular ed student, we're getting almost $8,400.
And if you want to look at, the difference for voucher schools, for special ed, they get aided at 100%, correct? Up until 150%, or $19,000 per student, 19,000.
I think they can choose to take the standard expense, or they can take the actual.
Yeah, so they take the standard expense, $13,076, and then if it costs more for a student, they can take the actual expense up to 150% of $19,614, and that is coming from our district. Our district pays that. And then beyond that, if they have more expense for a student, they get 90%, but the money beyond that 19,000 is coming from the state.
Our limit is set at 30, so we don't get any additional aid until we get over 30,000, and there's high cost special ed aid after that.
And what do we get, 90% or something else?
It's some certain pot of money, and we divide it up by all the districts, but,
So it's a little different every year.
yep.
Yeah. And just for a little history, the last biennial budget, I wrote to Mary Falkowski and Kelvin Callahan talking about increasing the revenue limit, and they wrote back and said, Mary's aide wrote back and said, yes, Mary supports that, and she supports raising the special ed funding. Well, then when COVID money came along, she changed her story and said schools have enough money. And that, we've done all right with COVID money. Other districts haven't done so well. If you're a wealthy district, that's all based on your economically disadvantaged kids, and you don't have that many, you didn't get that much money. So, that was the big argument about this money should all be divided up equally, and Governor Evers chose to give it to, based on,
Economically disadvantaged.
yeah, based on economically disadvantaged, so. And then the only other thing I want to mention, if you looked at, DPI / Governor Evers' proposed, budget here, they say to raise the, revenue limit authority of everybody by $350 in the first year of the budget, $650 in the second year of the budget. So ours would go up to 11,000 theoretically. But they don't close the gap. They're not adding anything on for low revenue. And,
There's one other, without, hijacking this meeting, there's one other part that you'll hear superintendents and business managers and board members. So districts that are property rich and don't get much aid, they don't like the aid formula. So where they want to put the money into the pot is we get a little categorical aid called per pupil categorical aid. And this year, it hasn't raised for the last year or this year. And it's at $742 per student. And there's no basis of wealthy districts get the same as poor districts. So those folks that aren't getting aided want all the money going into that per pupil allocation, where I want everything going into the revenue limit to give us more authority. So you do that too. I think the bottom line is if we put it into too many pots, I don't think one of them, for example, there's something called sparsity aid. So small rural districts get a special pot of money. We don't qualify that. Most districts don't qualify for it. So doubling that pot really doesn't help as many people as if we focus on the revenue limit or categorical aid for special education.
I don't see it right now. That categorical aid, they weren't proposing to bump that up too much in the DPI budget. But, yeah, so this is, in the finance committee, Dave brought up the idea of just take all the money in the state, divide it up by the number of students in the state, and then hand it out. And Antigo would certainly take a beating in that formula. But it's what a lot of people would like to see. If you mentioned, if you're in a district that's not getting a lot of state aid. So the bottom line is we just have to be careful what we're asking for when we ask our legislators to support something. And typically, in the past, legislators in northern Wisconsin, I can remember back when Act 10 came out, there was this big thought that Republican legislators, that there would be a split in party because the Republicans from northern Wisconsin here would have to be opposed to the ones in southern Wisconsin. But they weren't. So there's no split in the party. They just typically go along with whatever is happening down there. And so I think it takes a while to, I'd say Mary Falkowski is open to this. I don't detect that Calvin Callahan is, but I would say he's relatively new and doesn't fully understand the impact of what is here in the north.
Yeah.
And I think they were going to have some listening sessions, right, Danny? Are they going to have one here in Antigo? Or?
They usually have one, and it's at the library where they have the listens.
But you
I
don't know
what date.
You don't know a date. Okay.
No.
Yep. So anyway,
Thanks, Dan.
I guess the other part of that is, that maybe it'd be beneficial. We discuss this at the board meeting to invite them into our schools. Calvin did come 2 years ago. Yeah.
Well, I think Mary is on she was on the finance.
She's on joint finance.
Yep. Yeah, so should be probably good to invite to the schools and have a discussion with. Okay. Any other comments?
The only other comment I'm going to make is that WASB is doing legislative advocacy meetings, and there's one on November 10th at CISA 9. For those who might want to go get a little more information on it.
When you say that, do you mean that they're going to have legislators there as well?
No, this
Or
is
is it-
somebody from WASB will be there talking about how you might want to approach legislators.
Okay.
And,
I've been to a couple in the past, they're really beneficial.
I think one of the big things they say is if you can create a story of how this affects your district, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
For you, how this affects your child would be good.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to bleacher bid for Schofield Stadium.
So, last year when we did the, field renovation, if you wanna call that, to fix the crown, make it a better playing surface, at that time, they also wanted to look at the bleachers. We had the big section of bleacher that had been there for decades, that were in very poor shape. We looked at renovating them, making them code compliant, making them safe again, and what that would be. And, yeah, and there's a lot of code things that were wrong with them, so versus trying to revamp those, myself and the Gridiron Club felt it was much better to get rid of them and buy new ones. I knew that cost is always the problem there. But they stepped up and they paid for the last bleachers completely. And I didn't know that was gonna be enough or not, but they said that they were okay with that all for this year. They would try it and see how it went, and we would address it if we needed to. Well, it was the first game, and it was pretty apparent that was not enough. So they brought it up again, and they approved to pay for another section of bleachers out of the Gridiron.
When you say bleachers, you're talking about the bleachers on
On the visitor side.
visitor side?
yes.
Okay, so another
Not the
set
Gridiron.
of those.
Correct.
Okay, just so I'm understanding it
Yep.
correctly. Okay.
So I don't feel like they should have to deflect the whole bill. I think that I should contribute some, so I would recommend that we pay a few $1,000s towards it.
So what did those bleachers cost that are there now, the new ones?
About $11,000.
About 11, yeah,
Now they're 19
and now they're 19, you're talking about
For the
doubling.
same,
for the same exact set.
Yeah, should've bought everything last year.
do you feel like that will be enough for visitors to sit there? I felt at the first game, which is where my kids went to school, so I knew a lot of those folks. Those bleachers didn't look full, but they just preferred the nice seating they had.
Yeah, I think that the general thought is that if we get section to section, it'd probably be enough, but again, that they'd rather buy one section now, see if that accommodates it, if not, then readdress it again, so, versus buying two or one.
So you're talking about this bid of 19,000, but you're saying the school should pay 5, 6,
I think we
8.
should pay for it. I mean, the Gridiron Club pays a lot
Yeah.
to do everything that they want to, which, I
And
get it, you know.
No matter who pays for them, we own them.
Correct.
So,
And we use that field for a lot of other things too. It's not just, I mean, there's a lot of other things, but there are other events that go on there that aren't just varsity football.
So were the bleachers full at homecoming?
I don't know, there.
There were,
The-
could all of the visitors have fit on the home side? Is that what you're asking?
On
Well, were the
home
visitor
side
side full? Was
The visitor side was not full. The home side was,
What you're
Perfect.
looking to, the school that came from Ashland, that's a good buy for those
Yeah.
parents from Ashland, but the
Yeah.
night that I recall that was just really horrific was Merrill.
Yeah, yeah.
Merrill night was really, I was disappointed, in fact, I talked to Jake that night about the bleachers, because we had a lot of the students from Merrill coming over, sitting next to our students, and that wasn't a good combination. If you would walk through and just listen to some of the jiving that was going on, that wasn't very jiving, if you know what I'm saying. Then some of the parents that came over from the Merrill side, it wasn't very nice either.
They were even worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's whenever I was mentioning to Jake, and that's when he found those other couple of, I think they were the ones that we use inside the field house here, bleachers that's been there now. It's not like the other bleachers that are there.
And I think you said once before, but the hockey bleachers, they're not in good enough condition to be toting back and forth?
Not really.
They're the same as those wooden.
Then they're wooden things,
Are they?
Yep.
I guess they are.
How does baseball use?
They have the wooden.
baseball has their own.
They have their own?
They're permanent, yeah.
At each field.
Yeah.
So my thought is, okay, so what about the, condition of the grandstand bleachers? Because
Okay.
I'll take it, I'll pass this around. I took this at,
Ready to be bored.
very poor, I mean, it's
Yeah.
a liability now because like there's such huge
Well-
gaps where they're at. People could slip and fall very easily.
We've had,
Is this the top of the wall or the bottom?
This is the step, and then this is a seat.
so we've had two different companies come in and do evaluation of it, and give us some pricing to fix it. We're working with an anonymous donor at this time that wants to help us fix this. So we have a subcommittee made out of myself, the Gridiron Club president, Nate Boyce, who is a member of Gridiron, but he was the architect for the county for a number of years, and a couple other people that are trying to find the right solution for that, because, yeah, it's getting there. I mean, it's,
Oh, I think it's definitely there. I mean, one person
Well-
slips the wrong way, I mean, and, so, but if there's a gaping hole.
But I think I like this idea of buying these bleachers, because if at some point in the future we decided, we're moving the football field to the high school, those bleachers could move there.
Yes.
And I don't know that that's gonna happen, but.
right. But, yeah, we're fully aware of that. We're trying to find a solution. The last price we had was like $90,000.
So would it be more advantageous to basically tear these down and put the same kind of bleachers in?
Well, that's one discussion we've had, but, when you start looking at, I think these whole 204 seats, I think, divided by 20, I mean, when you start to look at a grandstand, stadium seating, that would replace what's there, it quickly get to the hundreds of thousands as well. So, I mean, it's a big undertaking,
Like Merrill,
regardless of what we do.
And plus, if we went to the kind of bleachers that we're doing here on the grandstand side, you would lose the rooms in the back where the visiting teams go to. You wouldn't have that either. I mean, they're not-
so we wouldn't have that for a handicap during the game. We get nice locker rooms and they get that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're right, I mean, it's not
I like
great
Amy's
condition
idea
at all.
about coming up here
It's
by
from
the
1930 and it's been neglected, and, I mean, I shouldn't say neglected, over the years, Tim has put a few repairs on sections of the bleachers. I've repaired a few sections where they mold, but every year there seems to be mold. It's a big ticket problem though. And when you start looking at prioritizing my huge budget, it gets very, very difficult to prioritize that. And that's where I think that we should appreciate what the Gridiron has done and all that they've
Well,
done
yeah.
and are gonna continue to do, and we should pitch in a little bit to help them with this purchase.
Would you say, what about an idea of doing like breaking it into sections and doing one section of the,
Yeah, we have.
every year
we-
versus the whole thing all at once?
That's kind of where they're going, right?
That's where
Add
we're going.
another section,
Okay.
see how they go.
We've had two companies come and do a full evaluation of the whole thing.
Okay.
That is the game plan, is taking care of that far east side first, addressing that. I think it's about a third of the stadium was the price that we had for $90,000. It's just looking at it, you always wanna keep in mind the longevity. We don't wanna throw good money at a bad problem.
Right.
In theory.
Right.
And when we're talking about donated funds, you also have to pick a solution that people can support, right?
Well, right, yeah, you wanna spend their
So
money
it-
wisely.
It's a process that we gotta work through, but the intent is to hopefully have something figured out for next year to do some repairs on it. So,
Okay.
Is there space here at the high school to have, to just, start over and have a football field here? And
Lighterman Stadium.
Letterman Stadium,
Just thought.
just to give you a little more setup.
Speaking of an anonymous donor.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, the only thing that would make sense would be to put it inside the track. As far as doing a standalone stadium here, we don't have the area.
We
would
don't
need.
have the area. Yeah, okay.
There are a number of schools that do that. They have the track, football field, soccer field, all in the same area.
You talked about that, and
Yeah.
4K-12, like it's a
Yes.
big complex
Yeah.
with, think of that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, so it could, there'd be some work that, you know, like, the lighting, I mean, we have no lighting on track right
Yeah.
now. Things like, you know, there's definitely things that we would have to
And
expand
your,
to.
Spectators are a little further from the field because
Yeah,
you got the
lose that.
track in between.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a possibility, but it would be to do without something.
Jake, do you know how Merrill got all their new
They got a
field?
really,
They get a donor?
really
Is that-
good
okay.
anonymous donor.
Okay. They have really nice astroturf field and new track. Of course, our track is new too.
Yeah.
It's very good. I
Yeah.
hear a lot of compliments from other schools on our track, how our track is.
They have that big grandstand, right?
Yeah, Merrill's.
Yeah.
And also a big stand for on the visitor side too.
So I wonder if like our local foundations would get behind something like that, like Covantage Community Foundation, Remington Foundation,
I'll tell you
all
that
that.
the Gridiron Club has done.
And
their
them
due
as well.
diligence
Okay.
to contact all those foundations appropriately. You know,
Mhm.
they wanna be mindful of what they're asking and not overtaxing those organizations too, because they get hit up quite a bit, but.
Right.
When they did fundraising for the field,
Okay.
they were very, very thorough, creative about raising money for that.
Okay.
The whole topic of moving our varsity field to high school is a whole topic within itself.
Oh, yes,
Have
I
they had that
realize that.
discussion?
They have, but the consensus always seemed to end, you know, who from the donor world would support or not support that idea, or who from the Gridiron or anybody involved.
Well, I heard Veterans
There's-
was what I just heard.
Oh, but it would split Gridiron Club, right? I mean, there's people that are so
So they don't-
committed to Schofield Stadium.
Yep, there's some that understand the reasoning for thinking of it. But they're definitely nowhere near a consensus on whether they support it or not support it.
Hmm.
So,
Do we have to make a decision at now or you know,
on
at
these
this?
bleachers?
Yes.
Well, technically, they made a motion that they want to purchase the whole thing. I'm just
Okay.
asking that I think it would be appropriate that we would support it for everything that we do for
Okay.
our facility. I mean, essentially, once they buy them, they're our bleachers.
Mm-hmm.
My
So I think
recommendation
it's
would
only
be that
right.
we contribute a third, which is 6,000 or something.
And I mean, we don't have to decide that tonight. We only can decide that at the board meeting.
We didn't make any
But-
decisions tonight.
But I mean, I would want it to move forward at board meeting regardless of.
Right. Okay.
So we can move it forward with a proposed motion from the meeting, of the third, and I also was thinking of the third, what Ann just threw out there too. That would be a proposed motion, and it can be changed by anything.
At a board meeting. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so,
One thing that I do want to just throw out there is, anytime we do those things, it is possibility of setting a precedent, so if another booster club raises money for something else, you know, if we set that third, we need to have either the knowledge for a rhyme and reason on why it may be or may not be different. And we can just
Yeah,
keep
thanks
in
for
mind.
bringing that up.
that's a very good point, because we get
It's always a
all the time,
difficult road to walk.
continuously.
So,
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Tim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Jake, is there something you want to bring up?
Are we experiencing something from Blue Line Hockey Club?
No.
No, okay.
Westland.
oh, yeah,
New
they,
mats.
they purchased a brand new mat, and they paid for all of it.
What was the price
10, I think.
That's not as bad as I was thinking, actually. The
You know,
diehard fans
and that's
put them in
really,
the
I mean,
basement.
that's the crux of the problem.
We have one in the
Right.
basement.
You know,
You do
When
really
you come up
just
with
have
money
enough.
to,
Well, now they bring that up, you know, I don't know where it is, but the gymnastics facility, if they raised whatever, a couple million for that, are we gonna come up with a third for that?
Right.
Or did they give you a number that they're trying to, probably not, keeps that up faster than it can raise money?
How far have they come along with that, the gymnastics center?
I think that's on the back burner with the discussion with YMCA.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just citing that as an example, if you were in the habit of giving a third to anybody who raised money. Yeah,
The rest of that was 8,675. No. So,
Okay.
well, I may have to consider my proposal there.
right, and that's the tricky thing, you wanna be able to support everybody, so maybe,
It's actually a 6 because they already bought one by themselves, I'm just
maybe
saying.
a less.
This is the second set of bleachers,
yeah,
right? And they paid
Well,
the first
so
one in total.
with the
But
entire
could we cut that
project,
way?
and I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but when we proposed the entire project, we did take a portion of that entirety. So we had the field work and the bleachers, and I made the same recommendation, that we would cover, the install of the sod. They purchased the sod, they did all excavating, I mean, I forget the percentage, but I know it wasn't the third, it was less, but they were okay. They felt that that was a good agreement.
Can you go back and look and see what those percentage-wise? Just send us an email.
Sure.
Okay, so we would.
Should I do a snapshot of any previous, I mean, we did, well, like we did some with the researching the tennis courts, I forget what that was too.
What did we do for the track?
We paid for the track,
We paid for the track.
but the tennis courts, they raised.
They raised, yeah. So let me and Tim sit down, we'll kind of think back and try to get some sort of, few examples to email it.
Okay.
But
So-
all that's been done with all this is just really basic implements to upgrade the facility that we currently have. It's not like they had to have it, or it's not like that they just wanted it because they wanted something new and fresh. No, it was in dire need of having it.
And maintenance is our responsibility anyway.
Absolutely. Of course, I've heard some complaints about the football field.
This
It's
is-
still being lumpy and just not smooth. Yeah, just walk across it yourself sometime.
Well, I remember what it used to be, so.
Seems
really smooth right now.
To me, it made a lot of sense that once in a while you should have to play uphill,
Yeah.
because that's the way life is. And lumpy's okay too,
Yeah.
because that's the way life is.
So do we want to move this forward to the full board with the 1/3, or just in general?
I'm gonna retract my 1/3 until we see some numbers
I
here.
think Keith was going to email,
Yeah, we'll look at some examples and we'll make a recommendation and email you before we
Okay.
put that on this, make sure you guys.
You'll see
think
the
that that's
motion that
appropriate.
Mary takes
Yeah.
out.
Okay,
So,
great.
no typos.
Yeah,
Wrong decimal.
yeah. No extra circles.
but yeah, big thanks to all of our booster clubs for everything they do. We can do what we do with them. So,
Okay. Moving on to the middle school window progress.
can I just preface that B, we don't really take about a minute. But
Okay.
D won't have much time, so just in the interest of time, I just wanted to know that we have some time for C.
Okay.
So I unsell from Bray Architects, that was the approval that you gave for me to start this process. He wanted to be here tonight, but he has another thing scheduled, so we couldn't, so he threw together a presentation of sorts with just some rough ideas. He did get that to me late, so it's not attached, I did email that to you. So if you wanna pull that up, we can just walk through it. Really the biggest thing that I want to kind of get a feel on, if you will, for tonight is, you know, what your thoughts are with a couple options and the pros and the cons that we'll talk through. So he is doing a full analysis of the entire building, minus, the 98 addition. So that first map just shows kind of different sections of the building and what the years are associated with them. And then as we go down, it gives a little bit of a snapshot of what the existing conditions are. Right now, it is, the original window opening is where you can see the concrete surround. Those were all windows. Over the years, they closed them in, through the 80s with windows, the efficiency side, and they put the smaller windows in. That was a common practice throughout many industries, not just schools. So they put in a metal clad tape panel, to cover the rest of the opening, framed it in, put those windows in. Those windows are, they're operable, so they all open, but they're also, they have blinds built in, similar to the windows in this building. So what that disallows is you can't do any gas filling in it to get extra thermal value. So you just essentially have to do single panes with blinds and metal, so they're not very good from that energy efficiency standard. You know, at the time they were probably a good option, but technology moved on. Also, one thing to note on that, there's that small, roughly 2x2 vent that looks like at top. Throughout a lot of these window openings, we're gonna have some sort of a additional item in there, whether it's an air intake, an air exhaust, what may be there. Those things we have to keep in mind when we're working through this. So, just want you to be aware that that's what is there, and we would have to either leave it there or address it a different way.
So are they talking about taking out this whole panel?
Well, we'll get to that, Andy. We'll move that a little bit. One thing to note when we get to the page 5 with the 1953, those windows that you see at the top left picture, those are still the original single pane windows. Those weren't even ever addressed or upgraded when they did the rest of them. And then we have the glass block fill-in on the upper right. He did touch on just what the 98 edition is right now. We're not going to recommend to do anything close at this point. On page 7, you just kind of have the options and goals that he had kind of put together as first. Just kind of give us some numbers that we understand what we're talking about is, you know, we have 121 windows that we were looking to replace, roughly 2,200 square feet. I did ask him, since he's doing the work, just as a bonus to throw in all the door work for us too. The original proposal was for windows, but he was willing to look at the doors since he was here doing work as well. And my thought would be that there's a few of them that certainly need to be replaced, and there's a number of them that are pretty good yet. But to have him look at that at the same time, particularly in the 3-story building, those doors should really be replaced sooner than later. They're getting.
Did some of those get replaced not so long ago?
Yep.
Some of them did.
Yep. Okay. That's why it's kind of a mix, but he's willing to do it for no additional cost, so I asked him to do that. The infill material, and then discussion that we had was last 2 bullet points was increasing the number of windows into a classroom and restore somewhat, that's why I put quotes as original appearance. Aesthetically is always something that I need to keep in mind, but obviously we need to keep the cost balance appropriate. So that's one of the things that, well, I said original, it might not be fully original, but closer to original than what it appears now. So basically, right off the get-go, there's 3 options. Option 1 would just be replace windows 1 for 1 and repair any of this around that we need to leave leaving the framing in place, fixing the exterior with a different material. That this material that was there, you know, has lasted 35 years, you know, it's done its job, but it's at the end of its life. So, very cost effective, limited disruption, we get increased thermal value from that window, would not change the aesthetics. And then he did list a few different window types. I'm gonna skip that for now as we go through the options, because those options are somewhat similar the whole way we go. He just breaks them down a little bit more.
So when it mentions the fill-in options of,
Yep.
stucco,
Yes.
so stucco also has to be maintained in the nearest company, I don't know where he's from, but the nearest stucco contractor, I believe, is Green Bay.
Okay.
So there's like nobody locally that could help repair or anything like that, so my suggestion would be to have somebody on our maintenance team learn stucco.
Sure.
Because it says it will last, 20 to 30 years, but it still needs to be maintained. There's going to be cracks, there's going to be
Yeah.
sections that fall off, and you're gonna need to know how to repair that and fix those little spots.
Yep.
So,
And you're right with that, but I don't know that I wanna go that in depth. I mean, I wanna.
yeah, I
stay
just
more
saw that, and
yeah.
I was like, I just
You're
wanted to
right,
mention
'cause
that.
I would rather not even recommend that but you're exactly right. It's more of a maintenance headache than other materials could be, so.
It looks great, but
It does look nice, but.
and it would be easy enough to have someone get trained in it, but I'm just saying that
Yep.
we definitely should have somebody that knows what they're doing on hand,
to go with
on
that.
staff, yeah.
Like I said, he put a lot more in there that I don't know that I wanna go too deep. I'm really wanting to have more discussion on option 1, option 2, option 3. So if you go to page 14, that gets us to option 2.
Which one is that? What does the slide say? And-
Option number 2, replace windows, increase quantity.
Okay, all right.
That'll be page 14. This option is kind of in between option, so it's going to add more windows. So it's gonna add ventilation, it's gonna add daylight in the classroom. Those are really the two big benefits of that. It's gonna be more expensive, obviously. Some disruption to the interior finish. Obviously, some of the framing that is there would have to be adjusted, and it will cost some more money, but it will be much lower impact than the option 3 is gonna be. But it would do the biggest two things that I like is it increases the outdoor light, which really helps the learning environment, and it increases the ventilation, which, whether it's for cold reasons or for cooling reasons, I think that is a big piece of what we should consider when we make a decision.
So these will not have lines in them?
There'll be a gas-filled window.
Okay.
Yep.
Will it look similar to what he has pictured there?
Yeah, and we can play with that more. The portion on the top, there's some infill options that are gonna be similar through any of the options. And once we get to an option, we can do some more in-depth options and give us some more pictures that would really show us what options we have as far as
What will adding all these windows do to the temperature in the building in August, September?
I don't. Temperature-wise, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, we have the ventilation.
It's certainly
we got
going
that.
to move that stale air, so it's going to appear as cooler, but I mean, it's still, it's 80 degrees out in the full 80-degree air, and I don't know that we're gonna get actual temperature being lower, but it is going to have somewhat of a cooling effect just because of airflow.
Are all these windows gonna have blinds?
I don't know the answer yet.
Because we do now, but
Correct.
If they were to have blinds, then correct, they would have to be on the inside of the room.
Yeah, and that's. biggest thing here is just adding, I mean, we would almost double the square footage of windows essentially of what's there now. So again, that would increase the light levels in the room and the ventilation. He just has a few mock-up pictures to kind of show you a little more what that would look like. Again, I don't want to get too into the weeds on these. But then when we get to option 3 on page 18, that would really be moving into trying to create what it used to look like. Obviously, that's going to be the most expensive and come with the most headaches. I don't necessarily know that that is the best option to go, but they have done some building projects that did do that. You know, in that scenario, I don't know that we'd be gaining any ventilation because typically the top windows would not be able to be reached to be open, so they wouldn't gain that. You would gain some daylight, possibly, but in a lot of our rooms, well, all of our rooms, we have drop ceilings in there now. So in order to, there's two options. You either put like a spandrel window, which is essentially a fake window up there, to block being able to see into that drop ceiling, which the only thing you're gaining at that point is the aesthetics from the outside. Or you rip out those drop ceilings, which include a lot of mechanical stuff, find solutions for that, and really start running up the bill. So I'm not in favor of this one by any means, but I did just want to show you that is an option.
Athletic, visually.
Aesthetic.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, that was coming over.
Yeah. I personally like, how it looks on slide number 18 the best.
Which one?
Slide 19.
Sure. Yep.
The most expensive option
Yeah.
usually does look
It does
better.
look the neatest.
It does.
Well, there
And-
was
and we
one
could
with even
definitely get
more.
some numbers,
Like,
but,
yeah, 18 had even more windows in it.
so 19 was the 2-story. And
Yes.
18 is the 2-story.
Oh, I see. Duh, okay.
So-
I'm sorry.
What about 17? Is that even more windows, or is that, am I not looking at that? Right.
Those are a couple of jobs that they did that.
Those are just
Oh,
jobs.
okay.
so
Dropped
they're not
into.
really, okay.
What he's showing is, so like the top window, if you follow, there's 3 panes in the picture, and what he's showing on the left is that there's actual glass, then there's spandrel glass, which blocks the floor and ceiling, because that's a 2-story building. So they put a piece of fake glass in there to hide the mechanical ceiling, the floor.
And that's what we would have if
In the-
we did that
Okay.
Yep.
option 3.
Yep. And some of that could be an option 2, using that spandrel glass could kind of be in combination with either option 2 or option 3. Option 3 was really, he was talking about keeping it more glass, redoing ceilings, moving mechanicals, that whole, that's what he wanted you to understand. We could still try and get the aesthetic appeal of option 3 by using that spandrel theory with option 2. But when you look at the buildings on slide 18, you know, that top glass would likely be spandrel, it wouldn't be functional, it wouldn't allow light to come in. Whereas with option 3, they would actually make it a window and it would allow light and things of that nature. But you'd really be driving the ticket up there. So,
So if you got a grant to redo all the HVAC, that would be a good time to go for option 3.
possibly, I mean, you have to put stuff somewhere. And that's where it gets tricky and can get expensive. Yeah, if I.
Where was it before they put the drop ceilings in, or have drop ceilings always been in there? Tim, you're that old, aren't you?
A little bit of help on, no, the drop ceilings were not always in there. But over the years when they made additions, they changed that. Some of the heating units are actually in the ceiling now versus unit vents, things of that nature. Tim, you have anything to add to that?
That's close enough. There were some they had some air handling rooms, some mechanical rooms that were converted to classrooms when they added the UVent heating. And I mentioned at a previous meeting when Jake could go into it, UVent it's a way that was very popular in the sixties to get heating and ventilated to a classroom. Very inexpensive way, they're noisy. Teachers don't like them because when they're not blowing heat, they blow them cold. And they're just not, you just can't dial them in and control it. You know, just leave it at that. The building's been around since 1924, so just kind of tweaked a little bit since the beginning.
So kind of to bring back to where I'm trying to get us, actually let's do one with the last slide 21. That is a school that they did, I believe, Fond du Lac, if I remember right. Yeah. That's a before and after. So very, very similar to us, and they went more the aesthetics of 3. I don't know if they did all the interior work or if they did like a spandrel to block that top, but that's just a really good, when you're looking at aesthetically what it could
Yeah.
become. That's a good comparison. So really what I'm kind of looking at tonight is I wanted to give you an update was first and foremost, just let you know where we're at on it, that we are working on it. We don't have, this is about all that we have. We don't have numbers, things yet.
Okay.
But also try to get a little bit of gauge on where you're thinking, like, you know, you said EFS is a concern for some reasons, but more so, you know, option 1, option 2, option 3, are we just, do we have any interest in taking the old window out and putting a new window in? I mean, do we have any desire to go that route, or do we wanna at least go with 2 or 3? And then not that, I mean, maybe you can't answer that tonight, but that's kind of, I'm trying to get some feel on what your thoughts are,
In,
what direction we should head.
in option 1, you're leaving the panel and just replacing the window.
We would redo the outside of that surround.
Yeah,
But
but
we wouldn't have to touch anything interior.
are those
That's
things
the
all in
key.
good shape, other than you don't like looks of them?
Exterior wise, no, they need to be replaced.
So you're gonna take the
covers-
exterior off of it, but you think the insulation in it is good?
I don't know that yet, but we wouldn't have to redo the framing, we wouldn't have to redo drywall on the inside, we wouldn't have to disrupt the inside at all. Just peel the outside sheeting off, put a new window in, fix what, whether there's some insulation concerns or whatever, and put a new sheeting over the top on the inside. And I mean, that's really just the down and dirty, quick window replacement and maintenance that needs to happen anyways. I would
Yeah.
not recommend that option, but, you know, I felt that we should provide you some level of options that, you know, I didn't just wanna come with you with one option, say, well, here's what I think, off the get-go, and then you guys are wondering, well, when did we explore this or that or the other thing?
Okay.
My opinion would be option 2.
I would second that opinion.
Yeah.
Then we'll drill down a little bit, whether we use some spandrel or some other materials.
Do you need that in option 2?
You don't need it, but we could. We could try to get more of the aesthetics of option 3, but still retaining some of the interior. We wouldn't have to change
Yeah, I'd be
nearly as
curious
much on the
if-
interior.
Get
So
a price
it's
on
really,
that.
do you put a fake window up there, or do you put another piece of material up there, is really the long and the short of it, keeping the inside ceiling how it is,
Yeah.
things of that nature. Then we won't have to mess with mechanicals really at all.
Okay.
And you're really gonna drill down later and decide which kind of windows we're putting in here, aluminum,
Yeah.
vinyl?
Yep, and those are gonna be some options again that we'll walk through as we go, you know, he did put a lot of, you know, this is all pretty second nature to him, but, I mean, if you guys want more, but, I mean, we have 15 minutes, if you want to talk more on both those options, we can now, but really what I wanted to do is get through the 3 options and get a little bit of feedback, so I'm okay with whatever you guys wanna do now.
Well, my opinion, I think maybe we should just get the, go, move forward with that, and then to see kind of where they come back with pricing, and then we can talk about the different window
Yeah, because we
styles.
can do a little bit more give you some like efficiency values for the different types of windows, some cost values for the different type of windows, and really go into that more.
Yeah.
Um,
Does that sound good to everybody? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. And
At the next committee meeting, you want that?
yes.
If possible?
Yeah, if
Yep,
they have it
we will.
ready.
Yep, we will.
Okay. All right, so then, moving on to education.
And
Capacity.
yeah, we were on Zoom call, so he smiled and said, I don't, I got the 2 weeks ago, and I do not have anything to update that on at this point. So,
Okay.
he appreciates the work. He said, please say that I'm, sorry if I was supposed to have something right, but I did not. I was more pushing him to get me something for
For the Windows Stream.
Windows
Okay.
than the capacity study, but we will
Okay.
have something for our next committee meeting on that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so he apologized. Couldn't be here, and he'll keep working, and we'll have more talk. Well, and I'll try to get him here for
Okay.
the next committee meeting. That's, I mean, like I said, he was intending to be here tonight.
Okay.
It's conflict for him, so, get him here, and he can talk a lot more about, the intricacies and the pros and cons and why you may or may not wanna do some stuff too. I mean, I know enough about it, but, he deals with this every day, so he really is the expert, and that is a value to have him here,
Okay.
so.
This is probably, I don't know. I don't want to say a stupid question, but Tim, how does that work with like energy rebates? Because there is a commercial rebate on Windows. I don't know how long it goes for, but
Before we
for
get
the school
going too far,
districts.
Jake should probably reach out to Focus, I'm sure you probably thought about, they need to be involved in the front end as we.
yeah, choose the window and yeah.
I mean, Jake, what is like with the electrical, what's the rebate, is it 10% or is it?
It varies depending on, like, with the lighting, depends,
Yeah.
depends on what the current wattage is to the other, it's based on usage, and different wattage lights have different incentives. If they're really, sometimes they have new incentives that come out each year, if they're really trying to go for some certain product,
Yep.
they'll incentivize that more.
Well, I know through the
So
end
it-
of this year for commercial, it's $200 energy rebate per window for
Okay.
commercial use. But that might change for next year, so.
Yeah, and
um,
similar to
yeah.
what we do, or what we did with the lighting, is when we put the bid spec out for that, we make the contractors, be responsible for that.
Okay,
I mean, I certainly look at it myself.
Yeah.
But I put it in there that they're supposed to find all applicable focus rebates, anything, and put that within the package,
okay,
so that I have their expertise working to find us those things too.
okay,
It's just another way I can get a little add value for not having to pay for it. Because
Okay.
we're bidding if they're not, they're not paying, or we're not paying them to bid a project.
Sure.
The thing that is, people labor can tell us what the rebates are gonna be and the incentives will be, and I'll let them do that.
okay.
Try to get every penny we can.
All right. Does anybody else have anything? Add, comments? Okay. All right, then, that being said, the next Building and Grounds Committee will be November 14th. And do we need a motion? No, we don't need a motion. No, so, okay, then we'll adjourn.
Alright, can we call the meeting to order? Oh, sorry, I forgot we'll wait. Better get in the door.
No, we're just gonna say the pledge. You're right on time.
You bet.
You can join us.
Oh, up here even?
Yeah.
We're a very inviting group.
I guess, no kidding.
Don't you worry.
So Keith, we knew you were coming.
Yeah. More appreciation. Oh, is it? No. Happy appreciation week.
Alright, let's call the meeting to order. Stand for pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mary Kate, you take roll, please.
Kristen Meadows,
Here.
Angie Schreiber,
Here.
Trina Bordeman,
Here.
Heidi Seaver, Julie Sprague,
Here.
Danny Pyatt.
Here.
Alright, is there any public comment? No. All right, so then we will jump right into the biennial budget discussion. I did not know that Tim wanted to give a presentation 4 times, so I just asked Heidi to speak to it from her point of view, so, okay.
Just gotta go.
He edited it for me. I did make copies and I didn't upload it because these are my own thoughts. And so I can certainly share it and you can, I wasn't really sure the purpose was to come up with a board response at some point to then share with legislatures or what, but.
Correct, yes.
So I just read it, but, history of the QEO and revenue limits. The qualified economic offer under QEO enabled school districts to avoid arbitration if they offered their teachers a 3.8% increase in salary and benefits. To provide an incentive for school districts to rely on the QEO, the legislature imposed revenue limits that set caps on annual increases in school district expenditures. To make the package more appealing, the state also agreed to pick up 2/3 of the cost of school funding. The changes became known as the three-legged stool of school finance. The first leg of the stool gave way in 2003 when Governor Jim Doyle and the legislature abandoned the 2/3 funding pledge. The second collapsed in 2009 with the repeal of the QEO. The last leg of the stool, revenue limits, remains with us today. The case against revenue limits no longer serve their original purpose. They were established as part of a strategy to prevent school districts and local taxpayers from getting hammered by adverse arbitration rulings arising from collective bargaining. That is no longer possible, as you know, due to Act 10. Today, there are no outside forces driving up school district spending that revenue limits are necessary to contain. Special education funding, or categorical A reimbursement, is currently less than 1/3 of the actual cost of providing special ed. So what that means is, that's what the state provides in. We spend 100%, they're only covering 1/3 of it, let's say. Does that make sense? I don't think that sentence really makes sense. So general fund monies are used to supplement rather than following through with the state's commitment to 2/3 funding as originally promised. The needs, however, have not gone away and have been exacerbated by the ramifications of COVID. Access to high-quality instruction for our students with disabilities was already in jeopardy prior to the pandemic and continues to be a concern as we try to meet the needs of all of our students. When Act 10 passed, she noted that we have seen a decrease in teachers going into the profession, including those in special education. Not only have fewer going into the profession, we have fewer highly qualified teachers based on licensure coming out of teacher prep programs. Many times, we are hiring teachers with no teaching qualifications. This is important as we consider school funding. We have seen a decrease in student achievement based on the transiency of teachers who can name a price in districts where funds are not an issue. So when the legislature comes back and questions why they should put money into failing schools, they need to consider what has led to that failing, part of which falls on their own policy and laws. Ultimately, when we are being compared to other districts in the state based on our scores, it should be noted that equity of school funding in the state is an embarrassment and should be considered. There's a relationship between the amount of spending and student achievement. When there are districts that are spending double on their students, districts who are not high poverty and have low numbers of diverse and students with disabilities, how is that okay? We have districts who spend $9,000 per student, with 70% district-level poverty and low access to community resources, rural, such as ours, being compared to districts who have 10% poverty and are spending upwards of $19,000 per student. How does the legislature reconcile that when deciding who receives and who does not? While federal funding is filling some holes for now, what happens when that ends in 2 years? The local taxpayers will need to decide if the current level of spending is adequate to ensure that our diverse student population gets what they need and deserve, or the state must address the gross discrepancies that the current funding formula exacerbates.
Can you send this?
My draw.
Sure. And I don't have the citations in there, but I have articles that much of that was pulled from, that I can send to you as well.
Yes, please.
At the last meeting, I told him John Humphreys will be with us at our October board meeting.
And we've chatted about that too, when he's not working as a school psychologist.
Right. And I applaud him, he says.
He is. Okay.
Anything for Heidi on that? Trina, Tim gave a presentation to our Building and Grounds Committee, also gave one during the Finance Committee too. So if you want, he like more of the numbers and the equations and such, if you want to get more from that perspective, those are options.
Okay, good.
All right, let's move to the special education transition update.
We have Michelle Arlen here, who is a teacher at the high school, and also is our district coordinator for our students with disabilities, their transition program. She's also taking on the role of an ACP, which is our academic and career planning, our Inspire North, which we are joining CISA now to give all of our students access
to what is offered throughout the state. We're just exploring that this year. She is going to be.
I was just officially logged on to that on Thursday.
Nice.
Haven't done a lot of research yet, but I officially logged on Thursday, finally got in.
Yeah, so great.
So, sorry, I thought I had like this big PowerPoint.
That's all right, I had a copy. That's fine.
Good, thank you. I was up at CISA last week and I did a similar presentation through district administrators, pupil service directors, teachers, anybody that was interested in attending. So, I'm gonna start out with, like, my funds are kind of driven through our Indicator 14, which is the first slide that you have. And the Indicator 14 is based on the opportunities that is allowing kids in post-secondary school and education to get, better ready for community employment or post-secondary education. So 2 years ago, when I started this process, we applied for a grant for probably 3 years. I was getting a little frustrated. But we finally received the grant, year 3, I think it was, and we got a van. Well, then COVID hit, so our van finally came this August. If you look on the parking lot when you all come in, that's the van we got. And it's been a process, but it's been really good because it allows our students the freedom to go out into the community and do different projects or jobs as we go. So I complete our Indicator 14 data in-house. We used to hire out every other year. You have to do the Indicator 14 data. We opt to do it every year because you can get up to 1,000, thankfully it's been 1,000 every year that I've been doing it, funds for our transition program. So it goes right back into our transition program. And we get about between $10,000 and $15,000 per successful Indicator 14. Sometimes I'm literally make 10 to 20 phone calls per student. I have people stalk Facebook for me to find out where I might be able to get
Let
them.
me pause you. So the Indicator 14, what she does is she's calling the year after graduates. So she called graduates from 2021 this year. Anybody who exited school. And she asked them, are you employed? Are you going to school? What are you doing? And then based on those successful, yes, they're doing one of those 3 things, either mix or one or the other, and that's a successful in Indicator 14. That's where that 1,000 comes, anytime we have a successful graduate.
And that even exiting would be somebody that has dropped out of
Yes.
school.
And they could be working,
in
they
this,
could be
yep.
working and they could be counting then, even though they dropped out of school.
So does that make sense where that fund comes from? Thank you, sorry.
No.
So through that, in the surveys I complete, I ask Heidi if I could complete the surveys because I want to know what we're missing in our program to help students. So it is quite a lengthy process, but it's well worth it for me to find out where we're at or what families are feeling when they leave here. So that's been beneficial. And through that, we gained our partnership with NTC, and also we've increased our rigor at Goodwill. We used to have a program, we've had a program at Goodwill, I want to say since Goodwill's been in town, but we've really upped our rigor the last 3 or 4 years. Goodwill has been a phenomenal partner to us. So, some data then which was collected, so this was 2021 data, which was the 2020 collection. Make sense? But it says 2021 because it's a year ahead again. Bless you. So, if you look at your Wisconsin, I'm very proud because they actually brought this up. I was in a meeting with probably 60 people and they brought this up and noted how successful Langley County has been with our workforce development. So these are students that are leaving school that are going right to the workforce and the success rate they have. And with that success rate is at least working 20 hours a week, making more than minimum wage. And I know those are the 2 biggest indicators that they utilize. I don't know what formula they use, but I know those 2 pieces are a huge part of the formula they use, is because she's mentioned it in a couple meetings that at least 20 hours a week making more than minimum wage. And I'm happy to say that not one person have I interviewed that has made less than $12 an hour. So I think that was pretty cool and exciting as far as that workforce. So I was really proud of that slide when we got that. So that brings us to our Goodwill through our school district. And this picture is from 2 falls ago. That's the CEO of Goodwill. He came to Antigo. We even had the mayor here, and it became a very big deal. AT&T and Goodwill Corporation picked Antigo as their hub to lay out their big $10,000. We didn't get that personally, but Goodwill got it to help with the job skills program because Antigo, in their mind, is one of the most successful programs they have in state. So that was really exciting. So then that brings us to our Goodwill partnership. So if you go to the next slide, every year come June, we host an open house.
We ask all case managers where they feel students should be. This is not just prevalent to our IE population. It's students with LD, even EBD, anybody that we feel would fit this mold comes to the open house, and we do all of our paperwork at our open house, because we want to be able to start right away when school starts in September. We started September 4th this year, so 4 days in, but we were ready to go. We meet, or I personally meet monthly with the store manager. The regional manager comes, and the store manager and myself, we meet at least once a month, aside from probably talking at least weekly, if not sometimes daily. Today I think we talked 3 times. So I've talked Goodwill into, with our ramping up our program, I've talked him into giving us a uniform, because when kids go to work, they have to typically have a uniform. So they supply us with t-shirts, and we make, the students get dressed. Well, we don't have a room quite set up yet, so we're utilizing the bathroom, but 231 is the start of our independent living space. But they go to the bathroom, they put on a t-shirt, they go to work, they come back from work. If they're not clean, we have toothpaste, toothbrush, nail brushes, combs that they've all been issued. So how do you look when you go to work? The one component we've hit, but have not had anybody yet shower before they go, because we have had some hygiene problems, and we're trying to hit that because we do have a private shower. So we're going to be utilizing that as students come through as well, because we want to make sure they look appropriate. Goodwill has even went out of their way and offered each kid a shopping to make sure they have appropriate pants, appropriate shoes, and then we get our shirts that they wear. So they've also donated to our table in there. We have a dining room table that they donated and gave us that as well. So then, after our Goodwill program's been so successful, I sat down with the tech, and through that started our customer care class, the NTC. So these students get dual credit. They get prior credit for going to Goodwill, and then they go to the tech, and I'll talk a little bit about that partnership in a little while. But they take a customer care class in which they get dual credit for the NTC. So they get both. The tech has been wonderful to work with, and Goodwill, we put it all together. So while we're on site, we teach right from the site. 4 days a week, they're on the floor working. 1 day a week, we use their classroom, because it's important to get to that instruction at that site. And the store manager also comes in. She may do an interview. She may talk about some things they've noticed on the floor. And every week we talk, like we started talking about your appearance in the beginning. And then as we go, we'll do interview skills, what it's like to just be a part of a team and a program. Paycom's huge. Technology is killing us right now, I tell you. They do everything via technology for signing in, signing out, verifying your time card. We have run around on Fridays trying to help these kids verify their time card, because that's huge. Trust me, it has been a nightmare. It's getting better this year, but it is a little nightmare. So from there, during COVID, I was asked to be a part of the PLC, which now we still call it PLC wherever the group I'm in, collaborative teams, and I was asked to join the Elko, White Lake, and Boulder collaborative team, because we're kind of the hub for all of their success. So I was asked to join that, and through that, they also, Boulder does not, but White Lake and Elko are also part of our CCOT, Community Care and Transition, and we meet quarterly for that meeting. But through that relationship, we did Amazing Race. I don't know if anybody saw it in the newspaper last year. That was a huge success in our area. And we also did a tech tour, and the kids got to see the different offerings through those partnerships. Unfortunately, Elko's had transition in staff for the last 2 to 3 years. So even though we keep inviting on board, they just haven't jumped into the Goodwill program. We did get them as far as filling out the paperwork and attending the open house, and then they had staff change over, so they didn't get that to happen either. So we encourage Elko and White Lake to join us as well, because, you know, it's a community they're all gonna stay in. So where we are today, we have 2 groups. We have a dozen students going to Goodwill, 10 of them from Antigo, 2 of them from White Lake, 3 of them from now White Lake, 9 from Antigo, 3 from White Lake. And we do 2 groups. We have a morning group and we have an afternoon group, because our success has been so big, the program is growing, it's so exciting. So we utilize the van for that work experience, as well as we partnership with the hospital, what I'll talk about, but the Web Backpack, the other program that are big from 8-12 for community skills, okay? So I always jump ahead of myself, so I keep reminding myself I have to stick to my slides. So then I have, we just opened up and we have our Passage program, which we're handing out at IEP meetings. And our Passage program stands for Programs to Assist Students Shift to adult goals in education. So we're passing those out at our IEP meetings. And through that Goodwill partnership with Backpack and NTC, we've grown our 18 to 21 program, which is now called 18 Beyond as well in the state. We no longer call it 18 to 21, it's 18 Beyond. So we created the independent living space that we're just waiting for Jake to get some water run, and we'll have our sink in there because we really don't want the kids brushing teeth, cleaning fingernails in the bathroom. That's just not always appropriate. So we're waiting for that to happen. And we led to our NTC, I first sat at a round table with NTC, I want to say we had 25 people around the table, and they said, what are your needs? We sat down and we created our customer care program, and that grew from last year. We offered a culinary program. So they bring Chef John, comes to a makeshift lab at the Tech in Wausau, and they go 6 times there, and then we travel to Wausau and work in the culinary classroom 3 times over there. So, and we partner, White Lake will come as far as us, then we go together over to Wausau from there. So that has grown, and both those classes are being offered. And then I was on site with Brad, their businessman, probably last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, and we're hoping to add a car, like detailing program, because we have a lot of kids that are interested in automotive. But what the programs are growing are based on the post-transition plans, the PTPs, that are coming out and what our students are needing. So as I sit in the IEP meetings, they do a PTP, which is a post-transition plan, and I get that data, and we try and build programs with the tech off of that. So that is what we're doing with our partnership with the tech. Right now, I'm actually looking for a senior that's a welder that is willing to partner. They're gonna pay him $12 an hour to go out to tech and be in the classroom with them and gain that knowledge. Just got that information today. They were actually here doing dual credit, and I saw Tracy in the hallway, and she's like, Michelle, I'm giving me an umbrella. She's like, hey, I have an email all set for you because we want to get a kid out there. First choice is student with disabilities, second choice low socioeconomics, and or first generation college. So tech has been phenomenal in working with us as a program. So I'm starting, if I can't get anywhere, then I go over to Mike Parizek and work that way.
So our next school is start a business.
About that, Oshkosh has a food truck, and I do know somebody approached me from Run Mug about a problem too. So you're right, because they literally have a state-of-the-art business that they hired a staff member to run it full-time, an instructional assistant. Grant is running it full-time, and this is up and running, and they go to businesses. It is, I have it, I actually, too bad I don't have my computer in here. I have it up on my computer with all the slides and what to do. So I'm excited about that. I didn't know that was like, I didn't even know. We're in the same thought process. So the next big thing is I volunteered 2 years ago at the Web Backpack, and I don't know if anybody volunteered at the Web Backpack. But while I was volunteering out there, I'm like, this is my total program. This is exactly what I want to do to help kids. So we have taken over the Web Backpack program during the week, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. The hospital has been so gracious. They built us a building that I don't have to share with the food pantry. We have a separate little site in there. And today we started Web Backpack because every Friday the backpacks go home to students, and we have 227 kids only right now in Web Backpacks, so we're dealing with that situation separately. But we're taking the students out there. We have our own door, our own space. So previous, we would have to set everything out on the table. Then we'd have to put it away. And that was a good 15 minutes because the kids do it. I don't do it, the kids do it. So I've had to train my job coaches to remind them that this is them, not us. It's really hard to get us to back off because we want to be doing it with the kids, and I'm a doer. So, but we started that today again. And we have a partnership, so with that partnership with the hospital, they put the doors in this weekend or something. Now we have the doors on there today, and we're ready to rock and roll. And our goal is to be 100% sustained by us, so we don't need volunteers to beg them all at the end of the day. But they will still be a part of our ordering, those kind of things. So that's our goal. I said, give me till Christmas for that to happen. It didn't happen last year because of that 15 minutes in and out. We want to be able to bag them. We use a calculator, like I had 288 cans of Spanish rice that we had, and we had to use a calculator. Okay, I have 288. Once we had to figure out how many we had, then the student punches in the calculator. Okay, now I need 227. So how many boxes do I need? So they are learning to punch in the calculator and the reasoning behind that. So that's what we're doing out at the Web Backpack. I think that's it.
Yeah.
I tried to talk fast, but I tried to talk my I wish I had a PowerPoint, that would be talking, I'm a hand talker, sorry, so.
You're in good company. I have a couple questions. The survey that you mentioned, oh, let me back up. Okay, so this indicator 14, I'm gonna call it a program, is that correct?
It's federal fund, state.
So yeah, the state has 16 indicators, with regards to special education and how it's federal, state managed. 14 just happens to be the number that we're talking about post-secondary outcomes. So that's one of the indicators we have to track, is how students after they leave and they were in special education, what are they doing
Okay,
post-secondary.
okay, so you're working with students that are in the high school, and then you track them after they graduate to see how
Any
they're doing?
student that has an IEP,
Yep.
when they're in high school, so, I just finished up them maybe September 15th for students that graduated, not last year, the year before.
Okay.
So I go and find all the students and have them willing to talk to me.
Okay,
Because I get better results as they're willing to talk to me versus St. Norbert calling and saying, can you answer me a few of these? Because typically St. Norbert's does it for the state.
Okay.
So instead of asking St. Norbert's to call, they're getting my number, my voice, my.
yeah, and you're familiar with you.
And I was able
Yeah.
to get a hold of, I had 25 students this year. I think I had 3 unsuccessful surveys. I was not, one was in China. One, I was able to get a hold of the family, and the family doesn't know where their son is. So those are a couple of the unsuccessful ones that I was not even able to track.
Okay, so when you call and ask these questions, do you ask about housing? Like, are they living on their own, or are they living at home?
I have to 100% follow the indicator 14 questions.
Okay, is that one of them?
No.
Okay,
I can't veer aside from the questions I have to ask are, have you continued on to school? If you have not, what is the reasons why? I give them like 8 boxes to choose from. And then if they aren't going to school, are they working? Have they worked more than 90 days since leaving high school? And if they've worked more than 90 days, if less, there's these questions, why, if more, then I go on. And then I have to ask where they work, because I have to write that in the box, where they are working. I found out a lot of good places to be working around the community. I mean, Amron's like the place where our students go work right now, let me tell you. So then, after that, I have to ask, are you making minimum wage? If they say yes, I have to ask them, are you making between minimum wage and 10, between 10 and 15, or above 15? And then from there, I have to ask, are you making, and these kids are so old, they tell me exactly what they're making.
right, okay.
So then, from there, I have to ask them if they're getting any benefits.
Okay,
And then the last question is there anything else you would like to share? And in the box, I could not put a student's name or staff member, but I could say that student stated case manager was very helpful and beneficial. I had one student tell me that he never thought he was gonna miss high school this year, and he cannot believe how much he misses high school. So I type all that up, it goes, don't ask me where, someplace into the world of whatever, and then we find out probably late October maybe, how much we get for funds, and then we try and put that back into our program.
okay, all right. Excuse me. Okay, so you mentioned that the students go to work and then they'll come back to the high school, so they don't leave at the end of the day, like our co-op program, I guess, if you will?
I have a work experience program that I didn't even talk about here.
Okay.
Like I had a student that was worked at Fuller's Auto Sale and Service. I had a student that worked at Rosalia Gardens in the kitchen. They can leave at different times, whatever works. We can offer custodians at all of our buildings as a student custodian. I have one that leaves 8th hour, works over at the middle school. I have another one that doesn't start till after school, that works at the high school, and I have another one that's gonna start for 1 hour at the high school.
Okay,
So the opportunities are there. They have their own job. They can get credit as long as they, have the boss fill out the paperwork. We have college and career readiness rubric that the boss fills out, and the students have to return to me at the end of each quarter because it has some of those competencies the students need to get credit on, and they can leave for that too. So that's aside from co-op, YA, and work experience
and how do they get to work?
on their own.
Okay,
Very rarely if I had an emergency that somebody had to go, I can add that to the van, but our van is used from 20 to 10 until 11:15, and then again from 20 to 1 until about 2:15. So I'd like another van personally, but that's on my, because I'm using my own vehicle, running the rest of it, so, yes.
Okay.
But it is, I do it.
so you're talking about the van that is sitting up here, correct? Okay, so that's being used daily?
Twice a day for sure.
Okay.
And right now, we're leaving 5 minutes early in the morning because they're swinging us off at the food pantry, then they're going to work, then they're coming back and picking us up and coming to the high school.
Okay.
So I'm kind of restricted to when they're working at Goodwill with the van right now, just because that's our transportation.
Okay. And this question is for Heidi. So if they're using the van is not licensed. There's no paper on the back that says,
It's in the top. It's right in the top. It's like, it's a license. Yeah, it's a temporary, it hasn't come in yet.
oh, is it in the,
It
Yeah.
takes
in the
a
top of the
while. It
window?
takes a
And you've been giving me updates every week, because we have,
So I was like,
last year, I had to have, every staff member that might be driving the van fill
Yep.
out all the paperwork
Yep.
and do the background checks. So all that's done, and I have Google Doc, and somebody, we add a name to it, there's really only been 2 of us that have
Yeah.
driven the van for the most part. I mean, you guys might have taken it for a ride when it first came to try it out. We wanted our instructional assistants to ride before we put kids in it, because it's a bigger van, and if they're not used to a bigger vehicle, it was something for them to get used to, so we took that, I took Tammy, and we went for a ride, and so she drives that, but I do know, I think, probably not homecoming week, the week before, I think is the last time you said the van is, the plates are not here, but you're keeping
Tim just,
updated.
yeah, he just said it takes a while.
But it is in the back corner, I want it out of there, because otherwise it'll stick the windows. I want it out.
Well, Michelle's
That
done-
sun bakes on, and I want it.
So Michelle has done for the program, since I've been here anyway, is we are looking at what kids want to do and looking at their interests, not just, you're all gonna go work here and you're all gonna do the same thing and then you're gonna come back and then you're, like, the opportunities that kids have with disabilities, has just exponentially grown since Michelle's been in the program.
And you're modest,
Yeah,
but
she is.
I hear it. I mean, it really is a crown jewel for our district, so we appreciate.
Yeah, she was asked to go to
everything.
the conference last Monday to speak about it.
And I shared that, and we can review, because we're really proud of you and lucky to have you. Thank you, thank you.
I love doing what I'm doing, but you're right, I'm on that business one next, because I just the things districts are doing right now, Lakeland has their own clothing closet. They're open 9 to 3 every day, and businesses continue to pay rent for that space, and then the kids work out of the clothing closet. But like you said, that's putting everybody into a one-size-fits-all. Customers and care is important for all students. I'm happy to say Goodwill does not hire their training, this is a training center, they typically do not hire their students, and they've hired 4 students from our program, 1 from White Lake and 3 from Antigo that are working full-time, and actually a 5th that's working half-time. So it's kudos to kids that have stepped in and really worked. And we're trying to foster the independence. Like, I was in a meeting with a student, and we were talking about doing Project Search, and I said, this girl she can't work for more than an hour. I can't do Project Search. That's like 8 hours a day that we're asking these kids to be ready to go. And so I took a step back, and I'm like, that's on me. How can I get more hours in for her? And she's in our 18 Beyond program. And we actually, starting next Monday, she is going to work 1 hour with our program and 1 hour, continue on another hour with the other program. So we're hoping to increase her up to 10 hours a week, and then she's also working at Harper on weekends. So, our goal is 20 hours for every student, but that's a far goal. And one of our other students that I partnered with DVR with just got hired, you didn't know that, just got hired. Flowers from the Heart was a partner where we used her. She liked art, so we tried to get creative, and we volunteered at Flowers from the Heart on the 5th. Then they had an accident, and they said, we can't have anybody in here anymore. I said, I understand. So we pulled her back, and we didn't do that. And then DVR partnered, they finally got involved with DVR. DVR hooked her up there as a paid experience, and now she comes to us 3 days a week, and she just got hired for 2 hours a day, 2 days a week, possibly weekends, working Flowers from the Heart on 5th. So that's what we want. The things are happening. They're not happening. I worked with Danny. I think I emailed and called him because I'm working on transportation for a student, because I can pick her up in a van every day, but what am I teaching her? The idea is to get her self-sufficient in how she can understand and use transportation system on her own. So that's part of her transition plan, is to learn the transportation.
so indicator 14 is a different, again, I apologize, program than the 18 Beyond.
Right.
And
Indicator
can you do
14's a data.
It's just a
It's a
database.
database.
Okay.
And the 18 Beyond program, the school, instead of calling it 18 to 21 program, we call it 18 Beyond. Students can stay till the end of their from the time they turn 21 to the end of that year.
Okay.
So that's the program that we are really trying to, actually Anita Manick was the one that told me this, and I used it all the time. I said, we all start a marathon, and I use it in almost every IEP meeting. We all start the marathon kindergarten on the same day at the same time, but how many people end a marathon at the exact same time? Not everybody. We're all on a different journey and a different path. So I have a student that comes to school right now that works, that comes second through 7th hour, and then they go home because they just don't have the requirements. But we want their day to look unique. They don't come into the same classroom. They don't come in to do the same things. We all have a different spot for them because what's different? A lot of schools have a site off campus for that 18 Beyond program. Well, we just don't have that right now. And I don't know if we will. If we can do this within the school system with the classroom, that's a huge start, and we can grow from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you gonna give them some of the brochures?
Do you want to?
Well, you brought them.
Yeah.
At least I remembered them. At least I remembered them.
That's not mine.
How many do I need? 6, 7, 1, 2, 3.
Is this something you want me to do?
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. Anybody need anything else from me?
Well, that was wonderful, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I need to stay, do it. Not that I really don't want to. Maybe I should go home and eat.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Okay. Child count update.
Okay, so this will be brief. I'm just gonna give you kind of a brief overview of what child count is. So we have Third Friday, which is a whole enrollment. And that's, you know, funding comes from there as far as our student count, but then we also have child count, which is the number of students that we have in special education on October 1st. They don't actually pull the data until December because we are still working out kinks within the system to make sure that we have an accurate count. But as of October 1, in WISE data, we had 2,035 total students based on our Third Friday enrollment, and we have 357 students with IEPs. Last
200
year,
and what?
357.
Okay.
Last year, the same time, we had 2,083, so we dropped about 50 students overall, and we had 365 students last year in child count, and so we're still at about 17.5%. That's been pretty consistent. It actually is upticked a little bit, but it usually balances out to under 16 at some point. Another, so that's where our funding for special education comes from, is that child count. And Tim will give you all of that, or maybe he might have already at some point when he does the budget. And we'll talk about kind of Fund 10 and the difference between that and Fund 27 and projections in 11, which is our general special ed fund, not grant funds. So when you hear the word transfer and all of that, it's how much is in there, how much do we spend, and how much has to be transferred out of Fund 10 in order to cover the cost. That, as I said before, the state doesn't cover because they don't cover two.
And Tim covered it.
Okay. Yeah, so, the other interesting thing I just wanted to share, with regards to that was transfer ins and outs over the last few years. I was hoping to get an overall transfer in and out, but we don't keep that number. Like at the beginning of the school year, I just thought that would be interesting to see if we're seeing an increase, and then what percentage of students with IEPs we're seeing, whether it's an increase or decrease. But Stephanie told me that, while we could get it, it would have been pretty cumbersome to try to get overall. But transfer-ins for special education this year, we had 28 students transfer in, 19 transfer out, so a net gain of 9. That's been pretty consistent. Last year it was a net gain of 10, 42 in and 32 out. 2021, I think, was interesting. It was a 16 net gain. We had 46 transfer in and 30 transfer out. 1920 was the last one where it was pretty zeros, for 43 in and 40 out. So that's pretty consistent. The 28 this year is just as of now. So actually, I'm having Ginny keep track of dates in the future, because that's not what is on her. So she's going to backtrack. She just couldn't get that to me today. But I just thought it'd be interesting to see if we're ahead of where we normally are or behind, because those ones from last year were total. Like 42 is total, 46 is total. Right now, 28 that have transferred in and 19 out. So, and that does not include open enrollment. That's just literally kids that move to the area, move out of the area. But I just thought that'd be interesting for you to know. Any questions about child count or? And that's all disability areas. So, and that does not include students in the private schools, just so you know. We do have, that's a different area, but we do have to give some federal funding to the private schools for equitable services, but that does not include those students, even though we have to count them in other areas.
Okay, anybody? Anything? Okay. update.
Okay, so what I gave you is the whole grant, but what I wanted you to turn to, if you would, just so you have an idea of what this is, I mean, you may have reviewed it, maybe not, is page, pull it up. Page 9, it's attachment B of the grant deck. And it just says the eligible expenses. I thought this would make more sense than trying to go through all of kind of the, requirements of the grant. If you remember last year, this was a Evers grant, so it's a state grant, and it was not something you had to compete for. It was something that they went through the title formula and determined how much each district was going to get based on, their demographics. And we got 38,000, approximately 38,000 and some change. This year, they decided to give us another, so we're actually gonna come away with $76,000 to be spent by the September of next year. And so this is geared towards mental health. And as you can see in eligible expenses, it could be educational programming, mental health services, training for staff, parents potentially, mental health staff, program support and administration. And so what we are doing is we're trying to blend, and I'm gonna share about the, next time, the school-based mental health grant. I separated them out because we were doing some work on it. And so some of the overflow from that is going into Get Kids Ahead, because it's basically they give you money. The other ones you have to claim, so like school-based mental health, IDEA, you have to spend it, and then you claim what you spend, and then they pay you. In this one, you just get a check for $38,000, and then you still have to track it, but it's way less. Lori Leiterman creates the budgets for it, and I just work with her on what we're spending, and as long as it's eligible, we just keep track of what we spend in there. So some of the things that we're using the Get Kids Ahead grant for are the AODA training that we're doing for Bree and Amanda. We had the NED show where they are coming. It's a program for elementary and middle school that is proactive. They've done it the last few years. Betsy Neufeld has. It's basically to pump kids up, go to the theater, and they get to watch, and it gets them going in the right direction, and they love it. So we decided to fund that out of this. Our Life Tools program, which we've shared about, is the program after school. That's a partnership with Marshfield Clinic that we have a grant for, but I pull some of the extra funding out of Get Kids Ahead in order to support our staff. They use the curriculum based out of Marshfield, and it's in addition to, so kids that might be even higher needs behaviorally or social emotionally or mental health, they form groups. They might do a girls group or a boys group, and we're doing 9 total sessions. We're doing 2 at all 3 elementaries this year, and then 3 at the middle school. And we have counselors that are trained in it, and then they have a facilitator that works with them. And they do this curriculum, and they keep track. They use the best data in order to see the kids, and then they form these groups, and then they look to see if they see a reduction in things that are going on at school. They've done it the last 3 years, and they continue to want to do more. It's just additional skills to help some of our students that have highest needs. Mental health counseling consultation. So I have a CISA 9 person who's coming in to work with our counseling group to help with their supports from about 10 days, and just to help our universal supports, also our secondary, our tier 2, our counselors no longer teaching. They are more in a role where they should be, they go into lessons when they do like bullying prevention, and they go in and do self-protection lessons and different lessons, mental health lessons through the mental health curriculum from DPI. But in general, they're supporting our students with groups or working on getting other services and supports for them as needed. Calming tools for elementary, all of our elementary classrooms have a calming corner, and so they purchase materials for that. The counselors do based on what they're doing. The trauma conference, we had a few people go this summer. Youth Mental Health First Aid is the big chunk. That's about $10,000, and that's, we pay our staff to attend Youth Mental Health First Aid training as part of our goal to increase our staff knowledge about that.
Outside of school hours.
Yeah, that's why they get stipends. So it's outside of, it's either Saturdays or in evenings, they get to choose where they go.
Really well attended colleges.
Yeah, and we open it up to community members as well, and potentially we would open it up to parents, and we just haven't gotten that far yet. And then responsive classroom, which is some of that expenses come out of there as well. So We have not spent down the amount yet, so we have some flexibility with other things that might come up as part of our pupil services work that we're doing. But I just thought I'd give an update on that because it's fairly new and it's kind of just hanging out there. But all of it is, this work is still part of our continuous improvement plan under our, student sense of belonging. Our staff our pupil services staff just took a look at the YBS. It's alarming, as it would be. That's the youth risk behavior survey. And just trying to continue to learn so that we can give as much support to our students and our staff as we can. So, any questions about that?
Is this tied to, the food service at all through Title VI?
No,
Title VI?
I've never heard of Title VI.
Title VI is the Indian Education Fund.
Thank you. Is it Title IV then,
Title IV is another funding source for support services, but it's not. That's, Title IV is, it's through WISE grants, like we do fund some of our SEL, it's all braided together, what we use for, so Title IV is to support what's going on in Title I schools.
Is that the well-rounded?
Yeah, well-rounded,
education
yeah.
system?
That's Title IV. And that's, we have about $46,000 in that. Amy and I work together on that.
So which one is tied to the food service for free and reduced lunch?
Well, all of it. I guess I'm not sure.
Based on our
What do
free
you-
and reduced lunch number.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What are you
because
looking
title
for?
is always tied to that. So all of our titles, Title I, well, not all our titles. Title I, Title II is professional development. Title III is our EL, but we send that money to our consortium because we just don't have, whatever allocation
The
we get.
community eligibility provision for food service, that's what you're talking about? That we just qualify for, where every student will eat for free?
What I'm talking about is, so the Biden administration came down with a requirement of one of the titles, and Phil, to me, I can't think of which one it was, that requires schools to teach gender identification and things of that nature in order to receive funding for free and reduced meals.
No.
Never.
I don't know what you're talking about either. I can look into it, but I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I wish I had my notes with me, but
There's no none of what I'm talking about has any requirement for any.
and I wish I could remember which program it was, but of course when I want to, then I can't remember it, right?
Maybe it was something to do with Title IX because it's
Oh, maybe.
non-discrimination.
Could be, but I still haven't, because we get the
There's no
updates
funds
on all of
tied to
that.
Title IX.
It passed it came out in July, I believe. The end of
Yeah.
July.
Heidi, do you have, this is kind of backtracking to our talk of budget, but do you have there's been a lot of discussion that 2/3 is missing. Do you have fear that if they do some sort of legislation to make up for that 2/3, they're gonna take away grants on the other side?
Grants all these are federal grants, so the 2/3 funding is state.
State, right.
So I don't know that it'll necessarily impact, I don't know how,
Is it
IDEA is based on special education, and unless they got rid of IDEA, they're not gonna get rid of the funding source that comes from it, so.
And do you think that's like a legitimate argument for legislators to say, well, they get all this grant money, why that's making up the difference?
That's what they've always tried to say, but.
Right.
But the problem is that IDEA, we get such a small amount when you look at what we spend to educate students with and without disabilities, right? And so it's supposed to be in addition to, not instead of. That's what IDEA is for, it's the flow through, so what they call it, but there should be some level of local, contribution to the students that live, then there's the state contribution, and then there's the federal, right? And so if you're gonna have states controlling education, states and local governments should be the ones who are providing those resources, and that came from state level. The federal funds should not be
It should be
to
above
plug
us.
this. That's
I
my
was just-
opinion, but
Right.
it's an argument that has been
That's-
made because it's always come from the feds, so.
I was just,
When they're having-
that was like kind of where we started,
Yeah,
I was
you
just
can tell.
curious where your thoughts were.
Yeah.
So I think what Angie might have been talking about is new Title IX stuff came out because, so during the Trump administration, new Title IX stuff came out, everybody had to have that new training.
Yep.
And now Biden is looking to change that, and he had new stuff come out in July, but I don't believe it's tied anything to, like, feeding anybody, but tied to all of the Title IX rules and how cases are investigated.
Well, because in Title IX, it, under previously,
Yes,
the onus was on
Yes.
the people that perpetrated.
yes.
And then during the Trump, it was the victim. And now it's reversing back to the people that are perpetrating. So I'm the coordinator for the
Yep.
district for Title IX. So gone through all the training, our status. This year we didn't, because you don't have to
Yep.
every year, but I'm also waiting because I knew that some of those changes were probably going to be vacated. But they have our staff now have the training that was provided previously,
Sure.
so.
So I think that's what,
That's just non-discrimination following the
Yep.
law. I mean, and that's what we do.
Okay. Anything else? All right, and we will move on to the behavior survey update. So when Heidi and I met, we kind of just discussed what we want to get out of this, where we're going with it, and that sort of thing, and that's kind of where we're at tonight, is to discuss, are we giving it just to the behavior groups that were initiated at the end of last year? Are we giving it to all teachers? Is the list of what Trina came up with last time inclusive of everything we want? That's where we're at.
okay.
So I printed the questions or Trina's original questions, and then I sent, and I don't know I didn't upload anything because you guys all had, I don't know what you guys had or not, the emails. I had added some things in blue that I thought but I don't know that you all got that. So we can go through the questions or whatever, and we can talk about that, or make some of the changes that I would suggest, but you can do what you want. I mean,
I'm sorry, I thought you sent those to everybody.
I don't think that I
Oh, you
did.
I
No.
see that now that it was just me.
Yeah.
That's not good. So Danny, since you're here,
You want to send that to me, what?
What is it, September
Yep, I
19th?
got it here.
Will be fine.
I'll forward it to everybody.
That'd be great, thank you.
And also, I think it's important to note that I was not aware of, a lot of these strategies that Heidi's been talking about are just being implemented now. So I don't know that this survey is time appropriate yet. That is another thought after, because there's a lot of new strategies that are being just now implemented, and we have these new mental health specialists and that are still learning their role. So that's just another thought.
But we've been using the PBIS system for, what was it, 6-7 years now, right, Heidi?
Oh, well beyond that.
Yeah.
But that's if you want to know the effect, I mean, if that's what you're wanting to find out, you can ask that too. PBIS is just a structure. It's not do this, do that. It's a structure, it's a framework to implement tiered supports, universal, tier 2, tier 3. It's trying to build consistency in expectations, but we also know that no system is perfect. So it's not about PBIS or what are we going to do instead of PBIS. It's how do we make PBIS better.
It
So-
does change each year. We have those
Yeah,
stages
I mean,
that meet. They start in the summer, and then update that framework and what they agree to use at each grade level, based on best practice.
Yeah,
So
so, I mean,
Correct me if I'm wrong, the PBIS system that we have in place is that's where the flow chart generates from, correct? So if this happens, then, you create this, and you can follow the flow chart to the evaluation to the, I don't know what the next steps are.
well, we have a support system which we're obligated to provide a tiered system of supports for academic, for sure, just in relation to the SLD law. Is PBIS mandated? No. RTA is not even mandated, but it is best practice. so that we can identify students that need, identify gaps in universal. So PBIS is a piece of what we believe through our support system and how we are going to address behavior systematically. So that there's something that teachers, that students, that parents can rely on, at least as a starting point, so that they know, but there's never going to be, that's our support system, that's not PBIS.
It's called MTSS often.
Yeah, so our
Okay.
support
Levels
system,
of student support.
our support system, we would start at the beginning and we would talk about what's going on universally. And so there's different things in there universally that teachers can access or whatever in their classroom, whether it's behavior or academic. So this isn't separating it. And then it progresses to potentially, okay, the teacher's still struggling, okay, what can I do? How do I access sports? What are the sports that we're gonna provide? What are the tier 2? These are the kids then that are not getting it the first time. What are we gonna do? We're gonna reteach, we're gonna have a student study team. We're gonna talk about what those kids' needs are, and then we're gonna progress from there.
So when you talk about tiers, is that what this is?
So that is the PBIS grid that just gives the ideas of, it looks like the places, so you might have, this is in the hallways, this is in the classrooms, this gives the expectations for students. So teachers have a common understanding of expectations across grade, across school. So that is something that would be done universally. So those expectations are the universal expectations that are potentially built into our support system. Here are expectations that we're all teaching. These are the expectations of the teacher, the students, the administrators, whatever that may be in universal. And then the support system, that first one that you showed,
Yep.
if those things are not applying for any particular kid or group of kids, then we move to a tier 2,
So then you,
potentially.
so if there's an issue, you look on here first, follow what to do, and then if that's not working, or then you would move
No,
to.
those are
No?
in everybody's classroom. That second page is like, here's what the expectations are.
Okay.
Here's what, in the classroom, you should be, hands to self, whatever they come up with their classroom
Okay.
expectations. And then they are keeping track or documenting if they're having kids that are not able to do that, what are we doing? We have counseling, we have this, whatever it might be in the universal setting. And when those things are not, you are not supporting 1 or 2 or 5 or 7 kids, then you determine as a team, okay, this is what we have to do to move forward, to support those kids in whatever way it might be. So then a counseling might get involved through the SST. So each building has SST meetings weekly at grade level. They are allowed to do what they need to do in their buildings to determine those SSTs and those times, and those teachers come together to talk about kids. So sometimes they don't have any kids, sometimes they have multiple kids.
And
But-
do you find a new teacher that flow chart, if you will? If I don't understand that, that is very overwhelming. I would never be expected to figure that out on my own.
Okay,
So first thing I'm going to do is talk to my mentor, my principal, the teacher next door, and say, I am really struggling with Sally who won't, and so that's how I would say 99.9% of getting support starts.
okay.
And the
That-
first
So you-
column is all resources. Those are things like a teacher would already have access to, or like, hey, I gotta set my classroom up, this is what I'm gonna do, and this is how I'm gonna evaluate my classroom, and these are the things that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use sticks or claps, or whatever it might be,
Okay.
But no teacher's required, this is just it's a guide.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if they think they can handle the situation on their own,
Yeah,
the way they want to,
absolutely.
this is just if they
Okay.
need it.
And
They might not
some-
ever look at it.
Mhm.
Right. In fact, we had a board meeting, I felt like I had some egg on my face because a teacher said at that meeting a few years back, I've never seen it. And I thought, what do you mean you've never seen it? So we had to go back and investigate. And it was at the middle school, and they were doing something slightly different. And at that time, Amy and Heather were rocking and rolling with supporting teachers, but they weren't referring to that all the
Okay.
time.
And
So-
I'll tell you that right now, that document we're in the process of even revising it based on supports and services that we have added. that weren't on there when it was created. So each level, like I've talked to elementary, middle, and high school, they need to look at their support system and what they're doing so that it fits their need as well. So like we have behavior strategists, or we have, those people that were not there. We have counselors who used to teach or not teaching now, so where do they fit in differently? We have a mental health navigator, we have a social worker, we could use another social
I'm just
worker.
gonna
I mean,
pass
like,
this around so everybody can look at it.
so,
But you say this is not, PBIS, right? Because that's like an overarching behavioral system.
Far more
This is-
broad than BBIS.
This is, you're calling this a support system, but it is the steps for the PBIS because it's intervention.
oh yeah, PBIS is in there. I know.
Identify
It's not-
more,
yeah.
identify concerns, stuff
Yeah.
like that, meet and select strategy. So I mean, it's like the steps of PBIS,
Well,
but
PBIS
called
is
the
embedded
support
in.
system training.
But these are things, so like PBIS is a structure way to do it, right?
Yep.
But these are things that are gonna happen. Take PBIS, take the acronym out, take that out. You're still gonna have to have a handbook. You're still gonna have
Right.
classroom. So this is stuff that all classrooms would have. And then you're having a hard time, these would be options. Man, I just can't make it work. This is my okay, now I really need outside help.
Okay.
And there's gonna be help built in throughout that. The problem that we have had in our support system is we have not always had the resources to be able to support it. We've had one psych most years. So a psych, normally, they would be involved here, but they can't be. She has to be involved down here when it gets to referral because we can't manage it. So it's all well and good on paper, but until you have the resources and support to support it, which we are getting closer to, it's not gonna be effective. Same thing with counselors or mental health navigator. So the other thing with, I just lost my train of thought, but go ahead.
But all the blue underlined things, they're all hyperlinked documents, right?
Yes.
So it's like
It's
a
so
data,
comprehensive.
yes, to take you to
And,
other
oh, I
documents.
know what I was gonna say. This is something that really is used by us to support principals, then to also have our pupil services staff have hands in, which is pupil services, counselor, mental health, our school psych. And now we have another half-time, John Humphreys is our middle school psych, which has taken the load off Megan, where she can be more involved in the elementary from the get-go with behavior plans and with things like that. A lot of stuff was left on whoever the principals a lot of times, honestly. And so the teachers aren't going to be given this and say, this is what you do because we have to help lead them to it. Ultimately, what this provides us is that we've done, and I don't like doing this, saying it this way, into referral if we have a student that might have a disability. But if we don't do those things, we can't really identify a student with a disability. That's the other piece, is that you have to show intervention, you have to show access to education, you have to show how they're responding, whether it's in academics or behavior with new criteria. So you have to be able to do those things in order to even look at a referral. So if we just don't have anything, we've had that happen where we want to refer this child. We'll have a parent come in and say, my child has a disability. We have to take that referral, okay? Whether we did interventions or not, whether we agree with it or not, maybe the child is doing fine and whatever. If by the end of the referral time, we don't have enough data, then we don't have enough data to support a disability. But we try to do it prior. Like, the whole idea of that is that we're getting these interventions, we're trying something to keep them out of special education if possible. We're trying to create systems where it's not just a put them in, because you still gotta figure it out.
Sometimes it's warranted.
Absolutely, but we want to have ones, like I told you at our special ed meeting, we want them to be ones where we're pretty sure they're gonna qualify. But our universal systems have to be, or get solid in order for us to even compare whether or not those children are doing what they can in relation to their peers or not. So we always have to focus on universal behavior or academic.
I had a conversation with a teacher today, kindergarten teacher. 11 of her kindergartners have never had any schooling. So we missed, for whatever reason, those families did not choose us before K. So she's like, ah. But then when she shared that data point, well, no wonder behaviors are up. This is their first crack. Not that every student who went to 4K is perfectly, still and compliant. But I mean, that's kind of just an example of, she's rightfully concerned but at least for 11 of those kids, it might just be a first exposure, and over time, you know, then when we talk about behavior in your classroom, it might not seem as extreme, if that makes sense. And one more quick example that those of you on the board have heard before, when we consolidated and put all those little buggers that live in town on a school bus, they had no idea what bus rider expectations were. And let me tell you, we had mass chaos, and shame on us. We didn't teach them bus expectations, even though they knew about PBIS. We made an assumption they would know. They didn't know, like kids in the rural parts did. But then once we taught it and reminded and expected, then it was more systematic and worked better.
Okay. So where do we go? What do we, Trina, what are your thoughts?
Well, everything that I hear everybody saying from any side is about a system, right? Like, it sounds like there's a concern that there's a system that maybe isn't working or isn't working to the best of its ability. And so we're going to have some sort of system that's going to address 80% of your population, right? The 80% who can make any system, they're going to do that. They're your rule followers. That other 20% is where you struggle. And so that's kind of where, like, the tiered system comes in, is they say that then there's 15% that need that little extra. They need somebody to touch base with them every day. They need to go over things again. They need little groups. They need mentors, that kind of thing. Then you have your 5% that maybe they need an out-of-school placement. Maybe they need intensive day treatment. They need those really high services. So it doesn't really matter what system you're using. It's still going to generally fall to your 80-15-5. I guess what I'm really struggling with is, are we just really trying to figure out if our administrators are doing what we need them to do, or are we trying to figure out if we have a system that's broken? Because I think the system is where the conversation should be, and maybe I'm wrong, because the system is what's going to take us places no matter who's in that role. But I feel like that's the battle that we're in right now. I think we should make sure we have a system that works, like our handbooks. How are they revised? When are they done? How are they distributed to families? Do we have an acceptable use policy? Are students signing our handbooks? Do we have, that Title I pledge? Any of our students have to do that? Is that followed up with them? How many, and I know we've gone over this stuff, I'm just saying, how many seclusions and restraints do we have? How many suspensions do we have? How many detentions do we have? You know, when you've got a kid with 15 tardies and they've got 7 after-school detentions, well, another after-school detention is not going to do a dang thing. So what sort of, what sort of tools are we using? Now, instead of after-school detention, are they in one of those life tools groups? And I know those are usually for the littler kids, but are they in one of those groups after school with a counselor instead of after-school detention? Do we have systems like that that are teaching your self-regulation? And our teachers, if they're struggling with classroom management, and you can be a veteran teacher and struggle with classroom management because you will never see everything. And you can just get fresh out of school and be like, nobody told me that was coming my way. So do they have, like, after-school mentor groups that they can go to? Do they have places where they can go without feeling like my boss is looking down on me because I can't handle my classroom? Because every teacher feels like that. When their classroom's out of control, every teacher feels like that. And so they need a place where they can go with their peers to get some of those tips, because you forget. There's so much stuff out there you forget. So I feel like we need to go back to the systems conversation. Handbooks, acceptable use policies, where are those tools at? Because that system, regardless of who's in the position, evaluations are what takes care of if people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then coaching and that kind of thing. But it's that system piece that is really going to move us forward. But, I mean.
And that's where we started, was that we were supposed to be looking at the handbooks. And we've kind of gotten here.
Well,
So, go ahead.
go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
No, I'm fine.
When we're talking about systems, and if we want to look and see if those are working, the best way to do that and the most efficient way, and more, especially for time-wise, is to ask the people who are actually implementing those systems.
You're going to get perception.
Yes.
But you might not get.
They're going to know if if this plan is working for this student or it's not, or it's, working for this one or it's not, or I'm still having all these problems in my classroom even though I'm trying to implement the system that we have in place, that's what we need to know, and we need to know it in a raw, truthful way. We're trying to get to the root cause of things, and we're trying, that also helps, support the morale of our teachers and staff, because it shows us as board members care, we want to know from them what's going on. Do you feel this is working? Do you feel this could be done more efficiently? Because we don't, maybe there's suggestions out there that would be a game changer and work fabulously. But we just don't know because we haven't asked those questions.
Two things that come to my mind. One would be it's so individualized. So at least when I always talk to teachers about, we'll try this, if it works today with a student, it might not work tomorrow.
Mhm.
So it's constantly changing. So I do think we get perception data too. Well, anyway, that's neither here nor there. And secondly, root cause. Are you thinking, Angie, root cause of the behaviors, or what root cause would you be looking at?
Yeah, so, not the cause of the behavior, as I'm trying to say, I guess, the root cause of, say, a classroom distraction, for example. If a student is constantly over and over and over and over, we can go back and we can, look at all these different reasons why that student could be acting out and causing distraction? Or is it that we're not following through with, consequences because of all the various reasons that we can somehow justify? And is that where the system is broken? Or is it we're not implementing things, consistently across the board? I don't know where the real problem is. But we can't keep, putting it off on this reason or that reason or whatever, because,
I think each one has its own reason.
oh yeah, everybody's different.
I too wish consequences worked, because your example, it would take one suspension, one detention, one letter home, we'd be home free.
And for 80%, you probably are.
Right, exactly.
Well, when you get into, I'm going to say the real world after high school, right? If you break the law and you go in front of the judge, it doesn't matter how much, this, that, or other things happen to you. The fact is, that was the law, you broke it, here's the consequence.
I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
not true.
I know, I'm not saying you are. But I'm saying, so to justify how their actions are in school, for all these other reasons, and not giving them consequences, maybe it's, suspension is gonna work all the time. Maybe it's not, maybe detention's not gonna work all the time, but we still need to do those things.
And they are. We had 4
So it
times as
sounds-
many suspensions last year than.
It sounds like
Danny about that.
there's an idea or perception or whatnot that those things aren't happening.
Correct.
So that is,
There's no consistency. So, for
so that is,
example,
so there's not consequences being given out and there's
Yep.
not consistency.
yes,
Okay. So where is that coming from? I'm legit asking, because I'm having a hard time with all of this, because you're right. In the real world, one of the things I frequently say to kids is, you can't do that at Walmart, you can't do it here. You just can't. But
Right.
at the same time,
Pick a
I don't,
different spot.
Hey,
you can do a lot of things there.
hey, we run a tight ship.
It's just, everybody's got a Walmart, you couldn't go in McDonald's for a long time. Anyway, so it's also your learning opportunity, right? It's also, there's still their learning opportunity. So it's gonna depend on how you have that conversation with a kid. So, hey, you're getting a detention, but you're also like, what in the heck were you thinking and why were you thinking that? That it's gonna have to be those things hand in hand. And I don't know how we're ever gonna know that, because we don't do the evaluations for them, and we're never gonna be in that room. Do you know what I mean?
yes. So let me give you an example, okay? So say we give student a lunch detention, right? You can have the conversation of what were you thinking, why'd you do that, all that stuff at that time, but you still have the lunch detention.
Yeah.
That student does not go to the lunch detention.
Okay,
just don't show up.
okay.
And then nothing happens. So what does that teach our students?
I know that we have kids that aren't going to detention and ISS that keep getting detention and ISS, and until the parents and the families get involved and we connect with the families and that they are gonna help, we have to come up with something new.
But-
We can keep giving it and they'll just keep not showing up and then they just darn in class. We have to do something different. And it has nothing to do with not thinking kids need consequences. Consequences are not punishment, consequences are learning. I told somebody the other day, I said, it would be more of a consequence for Johnny to have to sit in a restorative circle and face what he did than it would be to go have a detention. He can have both, but he certainly would rather sit in that detention than have to face what he did. And that's what we do as adults. We have to sit and face what we do when we make mistakes, because we do.
But that's not what we're teaching our kids.
Oh, yes, we are. I would argue that we are.
So-
We are, well, we're trying, yep. But again, 80% of them are doing what they need to do.
Right.
I mean, we're trying. And the same kids who often will skip detention, then they start skipping class, and that's why I struggled with the sweep protocol last year. And I told Danny, our suspensions went up, and after those first few times, they couldn't wait to be sent home. They don't want to be here. And then what? Then we know that they're learning.
So the kids that are disruptive in class, that are being sent to detention, right? They're
Well,
disrupting the classroom of all of the other 80% that do listen, that are here to learn, that are performing well. And so they're affecting their education as well.
Lunch detention is different from a classroom disruption, though.
I'm saying if that's what they got detention for, I was using that as an example.
I wouldn't think those two would go together. They'd be more on an individual plan, so. Again, if Sally, I'm teaching and she blurts out 3 times, I'm gonna talk to her about that and I'll keep talking, keep working with her, call home until she gets it. Now, if she doesn't get it, then I'm gonna have to enlist other help.
Right. I just have one more comment, then I'll be done
But
with
teachers
this.
have different skill sets too. Some are totally comfortable addressing it with no problem.
Yep.
And some would prefer to call the office. And we're trying to build capacity because admin, none of us are magicians either. And we really, whoever has the relationship with that student has the best chance
Yes.
of helping him or her correct.
I would agree with that. So I just want to tell you an experience that we had with my daughter last year. She had one of her classes had a student that was repeatedly disruptive. And that teacher literally spent the entire class repeating herself over, and she didn't get through the lesson, just over and over and over. And Trinity was like, yeah, we didn't learn hardly anything in this class today because, it was so disruptive and blah, blah, blah. And teacher couldn't get past the first part and she just had to keep repeating herself, literally over and over and over. And so then they have to go online and teach it to themselves using their online books or, that way, because the teacher didn't get to teach it because of one student. So where's the fairness in that?
It isn't, and I
Right.
would not endorse that as a strategy ever.
No, but that's what's happening though. I mean, I'm hearing it we're experiencing this firsthand. So we can talk about systems, we can talk about support systems, and tiers and all this stuff. I'm telling you that that's an example of what is happening. And so how do we discover where the gap is and how we fix it?
So, did you feel like you could go to anybody at the school to talk to them about it, or no?
No, because who would I talk to? I would talk to the teacher and she,
Or the principal?
more than likely, I've talked to the principal a couple times on different things, but, she would say, well, if I have him taken out of the classroom and he comes back 5 minutes later and does the same thing. Or right back where they start. They get nowhere with these students.
Right. So I'm trying to sift through this, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah,
get to
no.
the bottom of whatever this is, because this is all we
That's just
focus on.
one example, so.
So, right, like, parents need an avenue if they are feeling frustrated with their child's education to be able to get support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what's, like, you didn't feel like maybe you had an avenue, so, and other parents are probably feeling that way. That's a legit thing. So parents need an avenue to be able to advocate for their child's education. So, like, that's something that we could help problem solve. And then the other side of that is maybe where, or what can we do with those kids where we as a school can't go any further? How do we get them supports from, like, the county or things like that, that we don't have that control, right? And that's your top 5 definitely need those kind of things. So how do maybe we need to have the county at the table at some point and say, hey, how are we gonna make this work together? I know you're strapped, I know we're strapped, but we still have these kids who are eventually going to become adults in our community, and we need them to be successful in some way, be able to have a job, be able to pay the rent. How are we gonna work together to be able to get them those skills? And we probably do some of that.
Our county gave up on truancy at this point because they can't even help us with truancy.
I believe that.
So I'm just saying.
I know,
like,
right.
We have very strong relationships with, and what she's talking about is not necessarily even a kid who needs county intervention. She's talking about any kid who
Yeah,
may come in the classroom and be disruptive. And that's a teacher we had to deal with. You're actually absolutely right with parents having an avenue to be able to address their concerns if that's their concern. I agree with that 100%. So.
We could expand the Things program. Is that what it's called?
None of us know the answer, obviously.
Right.
We
And
be
it's
doing
not
it, and it's
fixable.
not,
It's
not
continual, just trying to get
Yeah.
better.
Right,
And
right.
Heidi taught me this, and I do believe it. When I was teaching, maybe 1 or 2. But increasingly, it isn't 1 or 2 anymore. We're having, like, kindergarten class, 11 of those kids. I mean, the numbers are more significant than they used to be.
Our community is changing.
100%.
And we have to embrace that and figure out how to strategize around.
Because we're not gonna change.
No, and part of it is early intervention in our younger grades to include parents as much as we can to try to get them invested in their child's education, make them want to come back to school, because a lot of them have more experiences in school too. And so, like, that's just a reality that we have to figure out so that everybody can achieve. And it's not picking or choosing.
Right.
It's just our reality. And there's things that we can do that we know work, and we might have to dig in more in our community because of the fact that we have these high needs. And COVID exacerbated it. I know people want to say, well, COVID's over. No, the ramifications of what happened, and we were one of the lucky ones because we stayed open at least. We had people that had choice. But we're still recovering. And our YRBS will show that, not just in our district, but in the state and around the country. Like, this was huge. High schoolers who were not connected other than their device, right? And, I mean, I just don't want to forget, like we're still in recovery.
Well, and, I mean, the cost of everything and inflation going up, it's not
Absolutely.
making
No.
less stress for families,
No.
right? Like,
Right.
it's not gonna help behaviors go down
No.
because families are more stressed.
The ending message I want every teacher to trust is that we'll continue trying. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else, including the rare cases where students are placed out of the public school or in day treatment, like Trina was saying. That is rare.
And they come back.
But they will come back, and because we're a public school, I mean, we take everybody, not only because it's the law, it's the right thing to do, because if we don't help kids, who's going to? Anyway, so what I would want every teacher's end game to be is just to know that tomorrow is another day, and there is support that we can try.
What you can do is continue to advocate, whether it's at the state level or what, I don't know how we get more people, more qualified people. I have to say the 2 behavior strategists that we hired have done phenomenally already this year. We could use 2 more of them.
Well, Danny, you had said what are open vacancies, which I had printed already for the board meeting, but teacher targeted support teachers, you approved as a board 1 at each school, each elementary, 0 applicants. Those are still open. I think what a blessing it would be if we could have somebody in there.
I don't think a survey is the answer. I don't think that's where we're at, and we're not gonna get we're not gonna get the answers that we're looking for from a survey. I don't think we are. Those aren't the questions that we're asking, so I don't know if it's having Heidi bring in one of the behavioral strategists and tell us what they're doing, and I don't know what the answer is. But it's something that we need to keep looking at, and
Yeah, I mean, if we could have Jerry Steger come in and talk to us and.
He's an IA, he can certainly share if he wants, the support IA,
He's the one that handles the behavior for the most part
some,
at high school.
yeah, so we hired Scott Sigmund, who is a licensed, I mean, we're getting him licensed, but he's the behavior strategist. He's the one that came from Hobby Home and had been there for 10 years. And so he is working with Jerry. He's but he's more coaching teachers also, but also has more of the level of, he's a CPI trainer. He's got behavior, Jerry does a fabulous job, but he's kind of cleanup, he bad cleanup. Like, I gotta take this kid out of class because he's being disruptive. And Scott, our goal is to try to get in there and support people before they have to.
So is Scott here daily and then he works with kids daily?
He's daily right now.
Okay.
And we're looking at how to utilize his expertise. It's a new position, so we meet regularly and with the high school, what we need and how can we, and he's got great ideas like, I think we should do this with ISS, and I think we should do this, and works well with the staff. He's gone into some classrooms to observe and then help teachers, and but he's still growing and learning too, because he's not a trained teacher. He was a behavior strategist for Humming. So, we're trying to use his skill set. Lynn, on the other hand, works K-5, and she was a principal in a high behavior school in Sheboygan, and she's coaching teams of teachers. Now, she still has some kids that she's gonna write behavior plans for and work through that, but just we're using them and their expertise in the best way that we can right now.
So question, with regards to, what was her name? Lynn.
Walters,
Yeah, so she worked in Sheboygan, high behavior school. Okay, so is she implementing the same strategies they used there?
Absolutely. She's like, yes, restorative, yes, they were inclusive, but they also had a lot more support than we do.
So if they didn't work there, why would they work here?
They were working there. What does work mean? I guess when you say working.
Meaning, addressing the behavioral
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah, they use PBIS, and I'm just saying she had a high behavioral school, high need school. I'm not saying they were bad. She ran a pretty good ship. I was happy to have her, like her experience.
Okay, so when you say behavioral school, you're not meaning that there was high instances of behavioral
I'm saying they had
issues?
a lot of students who had high behavioral needs, and they didn't go away, but how they addressed them, she was very positive about addressing them. Whether it was restorative practices, responsive classroom, all the things that we're trying to start to implement, they were implementing there. They had a system of support there, and they saw successes, and they had integrated classrooms. But again, they had way more supports than we do. I'm just being honest, and we
Right.
had more facilities that were conducive. We have people, mental health counselors, psychs sharing offices. They can't even see kids, like they have to schedule their time in our elementary buildings because of that. So, and we have CCS workers coming in, we have social service workers coming in, we have these people coming in to work with our kids. And I can't speak highly of our pupil services team for doing all the work that they do and not always having the resources. They just get it done. But it's not enough for the population they serve. And so then you see the load being heavy. And that's why you have 10 years ago, 20 kids in a classroom wasn't a big deal. That's high, they consider that a high classroom, a high population classroom right now.
Well,
is
right.
20. And so it's different. It's different. And we have, again, I can't stress this enough, is we have teachers in classrooms, and we try to support them, but that are coming in without an education background. That's a big deal. And it's like retraining or trying to train them in classroom management and all these things while they're on the job. And that's a lot of our staff now. And instructional assistants, our paraprofessionals, we have some fabulous ones, but we also have to let some go sometimes because they don't even have, they don't know the boundaries and ethics, right? Stuff that just you think you would know coming in, but you don't. And so the load gets heavy on how to try to support this. So then it looks like it's a systems issue where we're failing, but we're not. It's just we need. Yeah, it is, and I struggle because I see the work that they're doing on the front end, but I also see the need for Like the Wings program right now is going very well. And that's because it's supported well, the structure is good, all of those things, and we have the right people on the bus, Tyler and Julie. And so I'm just saying that's a big deal. And, you know, it's not excuses. This is just a reality.
Very hard work.
So, yeah. And we haven't talked about special ed.
Well, we keep trying to figure it out. Our next meeting's gonna be on Monday, November 14th. Maybe we'll have answers then.